YouTube test 1, 2, 3.
Did you hear it? Yes.
YouTube test 1, 2, 3.
Sorry. It's pretty loud. Pretty loud, I know. Sorry.
Okay, great.
I can mute this one for now.
Okay, welcome everyone. Oh, there we go. Welcome everyone, and we will call to order our regular meeting of council. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge and recognize that we work, live, and play in the city of Port Alberni, which is situated on the unceded territories of the Sechot and Hoopachesit First Nations. And before we go to our agenda, I would just like to turn to Councillor Mealy for the, I think, presentation of this beautiful trophy that we see here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, and I was not at the arena for this, but next year I will volunteer my time for this. But there is I'm going to call it the Intergovernmental Cup. We'll call it, I don't know if that's the official words for it or not, but there is a hockey game that goes on between the ACRD and the City of Port Alberni. Second annual, I believe, was this year's the second annual. So I'd like to congratulate the City of Port Alberni winning 9-5 on our very own warehouse rice. And we do have a cup here today as well, which is really nice. And so I'm sure that will be displayed proudly here at City Hall. And this is not a dig on the ACRD at all whatsoever. So when I go to the meeting later on this week, they won't give me a hard time. But I'd like to congratulate our very own City of Port Alberni players for winning this cup. And we'll have it on display at City Hall if anybody wants any autographs from City Hall. So.
Thank you. And I think that the teams did fundraise a few $100s as well for kids sports. So always appreciate our staff getting together for fun events and making it a good community fundraiser as well. Thank you. And before we go to our approval of our agenda, I'll just take a moment to introduce our new councillor sworn in today before his first very full day of meetings. We've been here since 9, and I'm sure we're going to be here a while longer. Councillor Tom Verbrugge, welcome to our council. We've had a few council orientation sessions with Councillor Verbrugge already. Looking forward to having him as a part of our council team. And Tom, I will just pass it over to you if you want to test your microphone, introduce yourself, and say anything you'd like.
Thank you, Sherry. No, nothing to say.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we will go to our approval of the agenda. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to be added to the agenda from councillors? Seeing none, any late items from our corporate officer?
No late items, Madam Mayor.
Wonderful. Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And we have adoption of minutes. We have minutes from the special meeting held on December 3rd, 2024, and the special meeting and regular meeting held on December 9th, 2024 as presented.
Move to adopt.
Moved to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the minutes. On the motion, all in favor?
For voting.
Carried, none opposed. We have no delegations today, so we'll move on to unfinished business. And the first item is our 5-year financial plan Q&A summary. Largely the same as it was, but just an opportunity if any members of council, obviously we do have a budget meeting tomorrow, but if any members of council did have additional questions that they'd like to add to the Q&A summary, that could be done now. Seeing none, we will continue on. Staff reports, and we have quarterly department reports from Fire and Infrastructure Services Department. So I'll start with our fire department, and we will invite Chief Owens up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So before you have our quarterly update report, and I've also prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which is in front of you now. So just an overview of what we'll cover, just some stats, a recap on communications, fire prevention, and then looking ahead. Maybe. There we go. Yeah, so as you can see, 2024 was our second busiest year on record. However, we were down 2% from the previous year. If you look at the difference in calls between 2023 and 2024, it's only a difference of 64 calls. And then if you look over at the first responder numbers there, we were down 65 calls. So essentially, the number of calls that were reduced over the past year were strictly in that first responder category. As you can also see, structure fires have remained fairly static, as they have been with the exception of 2020, where we had a lighter year on structure fires during the pandemic. Motor vehicle incidents have crept up a little bit again, with obviously lots of travel happening to the West Coast and more tourist activity within the community. Communication, so our X page, I guess it is now, has remained relatively static from 2023 with regards to followers. This again is something that is more subscribed to, I would say, by the traveling public, whereas no need to educate anybody in this room. This is a Facebook community, and we continue to see growth within our Facebook following, another 9% up to 8,600 followers there. And we're seeing individual posts will reach up to 60,000 people at times. And we continue to give interviews to our local newspaper, local radio, as well as the TV news. This clicker is for show only, I think. Fire prevention in 2024, so we participated in 328 fire inspections. That's both between our company inspections, which are facilitated by our duty crew and the Chief Fire Prevention Officer. We also were a part of 156 business license inspections. We conducted 26 fire smart assessments. We had 15 different groups that toured the fire department, and then we sent the truck out on request to 4 different on-site truck tours. We did 5 different fire extinguisher training events in the community, which were available to do upon request. And then the Fire Safe program, which I touched on last time, has been quite successful, where we've gone around to 500 different addresses within the community to check on people's smoke alarms to make sure that they're functioning, and to install new smoke alarms where their own are outdated or there aren't enough of them. So that's been a great success. So looking ahead, we have the imminent retirement of Captain Scott Burrows, who has given the city more than 34 years of service, and also the retirement of our Chief Fire Prevention Officer, Darren Fines, who's been with the city more than 23 years. We'll also see in the coming months, the Fire Master Plan will come back to Council with once it's finalized to be presented and in front of you for adoption. And that's all that I have for you, if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief Owens, your numbers have gone down slightly, not a lot, but at least it's going in the right direction, so I was very happy to see that. But is there a number, I know the numbers for your medical calls have gone up significantly in the last 2 to 3 years, but is there a number of medical calls that you would feel comfortable with without straining your fire department, the firefighters? And because I know they've been under a significant amount of strain and overwork the last couple of years. Is there a number that you would be comfortable with? I'm just thinking, what number can we work towards?
Thank you for the question. It's a tough question.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. You're allowed to ask tough questions. I would say that a number that sticks out in my mind is from the fire underwriters survey, where they indicated that 2,500 calls is about the maximum that an engine company can do without some relief. So that's all calls, not just first responder calls, but certainly that plays a part in it. And I will also just take this opportunity to say that some of the strain that we have is from the increase in overall call volume. Certainly, a lot of that is being driven by medical calls. And then the other part of that is ensuring that we have enough personnel on structure fires on scene within that first 10 minutes so that we can sustain interior firefighting operations. So yeah, I would say that for a single engine company, according to the fire underwriter survey, they've noted 2,500 calls as the cap before you need some sort of relief to be built in.
Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the Chief. Chief, I was just wondering, you probably won't have this on hand, but is it possible to break down the number of MVI responses to those within the city and those outside of the city?
Yes, we definitely can do that. I apologize, I don't have that number at my fingertips right now, but that's certainly something that we can do, and we can bring forward on these quarterly reports for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question to the chief regarding ambulance. Are we doing any more assisting on driving the ambulance as we have in the past, or do we have numbers if we are? Any stats on that?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Solda. Yeah, we do continue to drive ambulance periodically. I will say that it's not as frequent as it had been in some years past. But we do have situations that arise from time to time where we'll have what's called a single responder. So we'll have one paramedic that's showing up in an ambulance, and obviously they can't provide patient care and relocate the ambulance to the hospital at the same time. So we have fulfilled that on occasion, but I will say that that is happening less frequently than it once did.
And one further question, do we get reimbursement for that, or is that just a mutual aid that we do? And when our firefighters are driving an ambulance, have we ever had a call where for a fire or anything during that period? Just kind of curious to know.
So we do not get compensated for anything to do with the first responder program. Aside from the replenishment of goods, which if we use some materials while we're on a medical call, we'll just restock out of the ambulance essentially, or restock from the ambulance station. But there's no money that's exchanged at any point between the City of Port Alberni and BCEHS or the Ministry of Health with regards to the first responder program. Off the top of my head, I do recall an instance where we did have a second call come in. It wasn't a structure fire, but it wasn't a medical call. It was another one of the incident types. And as I recall it, we were a couple minutes out from the hospital, so we completed that transfer to the hospital, and then that firefighter boarded the fire engine and responded. I'll also say that aside from driving, as recently as last Thursday, we had 2 firefighters that were in the back of the ambulance, so a BC ambulance employee driving, another in the back, and then 2 of us in the back just assisting with a complex urgent call.
Thank you.
Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the Chief. I see that the fire underwriters base the grading process on 4 areas, that being risk assessment, water supply, fire department, and fire safety control. And I note that we're having a master plan for the fire department coming forward. is probably already written, so this is probably too late of a question, but I am wondering if that master plan, or when it's presented, the presentation could include some information on not just improving or changing or restructuring the fire department, but also what work we do on risk assessment, water supply, and fire safety control for the purposes of benefiting the insurability of citizens in Port Alberni.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Patola. Yeah, I believe that the fire master plan, I've seen an initial draft, does touch on that. There will be obviously some scope limitations in terms of what we ask the master plan to review. But certainly I can take that away and chat with the folks that are developing the master plan to see how much of that can be included without increasing the scope, which would increase the cost, obviously.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Mealy.
Just a couple comments, Madam Mayor, and I was going to bring the first one up during my report, but I just want to take a second to thank the fire department on the weekend. There was a medical emergency at the high school during Totem Tournament. Their response was unbelievable. Those that were in attendance and those that came, they had to perform an emergency medical procedure in a way that didn't bring alarm to students and youth in our community. So I appreciate all the work that they did, and I thank them all for what they did on the weekend. The other thank yous are to Captain Burrows and Chief Professional Officer Fines for all the work that they've done over the years for our community. They've earned their retirement, so please send along my thanks for myself and my family. And I just gotta just note that the communications through Facebook and X or Twitter is amazing. I think it's clear and concise, and it really gets out a good message every time on what's happening, where it is, and how to avoid the situation. So just kudos to the fire department on how they bring their information out to the public. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, I agree completely. Okay, thank you. Not seeing any other questions. I think we'll move receipt of, well, we can do the receipt individual. Thank you. Motion to receive this report, moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thanks very much, Chief Owens. And we will now have our quarterly report from our Infrastructure Services Department.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I will briefly go through the Q3 and Q4 quarterly reports for Infrastructure Services, which comprises both the Engineering Department and the Public Works Department. Starting with the Engineering Department, just a quick summary. You'll see the table on page 1 with the number of tasks completed over the last 2 quarters, predominantly looking into BC1 calls and assisting with driveway crossings, letdowns, and service connections. On the GIS side of things, we have continued to do a lot of work behind the scenes, building up our geospatial databases, and able to build us infrastructure maps for utilities and parks and such things. Briefly going through some of the master plan updates. The facilities condition assessments were completed by year end. There will be a report coming to council, I believe, sometime in early February with a summary of the results of that assessment, which ties back to the Parks, Rec and Culture master plan as well. Phase 2 of that project has begun as we move into the first quarter 2025. As Chief Owens alluded to, there's been a lot of work done on the fire master plan. We're currently at about 60% complete with expectation of completion by Q2 of this year. We've just started getting into the data gathering for the transportation as well as the stormwater master plans, and we'll be doing similar for the sewer and water master plans later this year as well. Briefly touching on other capital projects, the Bird Street redevelopment, the utility replacement below ground was completed by year end. We will be initiating the surface works coming up here as early as later this month. There will be some community engagement with some of the residents along the street there to update them as to progress and what we'll be doing with expected completion by, I think it's April or May of this year with all surface works complete. The McLean Mill site, as everyone is aware, most of the demolition has been completed. We're in the final stages of the final environmental testing and we're working towards final steps on that. There's a number of other smaller projects there. I won't go through them line item by line item, but essentially lots of things going on in the capital projects area. Moving on to Public Works, the Q3, Q4 results of what was completed, I'll just briefly go through by department. So for the water utilities, we had our diving contractor in for the Upper Cowichan Reservoir inspection, as well as the Bainbridge Lake water intake. This is a normal process just to ensure our infrastructure is in good condition and any repairs that are required. Similarly, up at the China Creek water intake, we had the intake cleaned of gravel and debris to ensure proper flow. Then you can see a number of tasks that were completed, just ongoing with customer service and service repairs, as well as the ongoing water quality testing. Similar for the sewer utilities team, there was a number of repairs completed and a couple of the bigger projects. One of the effluent pumps at the wastewater treatment plant was rebuilt and reinstalled, as well as all the grit chambers at our lift stations across the city. Moving on to roads and drainage, there was a number of activities completed in Q3, Q4. One of the photos in the report here, you can see that the Wallace Street west of 10th Ave was rehabilitated and resurfaced due to failing road condition. We also installed by the end of Q4 17 the rectangular rapid flashing pedestrian crossings. And I'm very pleased to report to council that through conjunction with ICBC, we were in receiving a $45,000 grant to compensate for those. So majority of those installed have already been paid for, and we can take that same money and reinvest it back into further pedestrian safety upgrades at further intersections. So very happy to see that. We also completed some work in the Dry Creek Channel east of 4th Avenue. As you'll see in a couple of the pictures, there's a number of debris and vegetation and other things that accumulate over time when there's not high flow. Those were cleaned and removed to ensure in a rain event that it functions properly. And one other small project, we on Lower Argyle recently completed the one-way conversion of the laneways for safety purposes, both for pedestrians and motorists. And it moves towards the Argyle 1st to 3rd redevelopment happening later this year. You'll also see a number of the tasks there in the table on page 12, just as far as some of the roads and drainage team and some of the work they've completed. And finally, but not the last, the fleet and solid waste department. So the number of repairs completed on all of our different vehicles across the city, as well as, unfortunately, I didn't have the year-end solid waste collection numbers for recycling, organics, and solid waste. But again, a point of highlight is that we are still one of the lowest contaminant numbers in the province for the recycling program, which is great. So just a quick look forward for the Public Works Department, some of the stuff we're looking for and moving into 2025. One of them is regarding the pedestrian benches around the city. We've done a lot of work putting together a strategic plan as far as where these are, what they look like, and coming up with standards to ensure that they're followed and adhered to. We've also initiated looking at some of the nameplate signage reflectivity across the city and making sure that any of our signs are highly visible and are replaced in a timely manner such that they maintain that. So with that, I'll open up to any questions council may have.
Thank you very much for the report and all of the great information and great initiatives in there, and really want to highlight the good work on the pedestrian crossing improvements. I know that that is something that was really meaningful to this council, and we asked for suggestions on how to improve pedestrian safety, and so quickly, it was like within weeks of us making that motion, they were purchased and starting to be installed in critical crosswalks across the community. And yeah, so really fantastic work. Great to hear that we ended up getting a grant for them and that now we can do more as a result. My only question is, have we made any progress with the ministry installing more or making improvements on Johnston Road? Because I know that that's something that we know of, a few really challenging crosswalks there, and we're hoping that the ministry would make improvements as well.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I need to catch up as I was away from work for a little bit late in the year. However, my understanding, we had some information brought forth from the ministry that they're taking some first steps at doing some bump outs as well as removing some parking stalls near the crosswalks to improve visibility along Johnston Corridor there. So.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Councillor Batola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not to waste time, but I have an anecdotal story about that. And I want to say the new flashing lights, fantastic. I notice them all the time. The Johnston Street, definitely needs more work. I was driving through there in December and not going fast. I think it was probably the first intersection, and the cars were parked right up to the intersection. As I drove through, I got a great view of a older gentleman going like this at me because obviously I was didn't see him. He saw me. I'm glad he did, and I thank whoever that person was for the reminder that we need to fix those intersections.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a number of them that are just so concerning, and we've all seen kind of near accidents happen. So, yeah, great that we've made a lot of progress, and really good to hear that we're working with the ministry on that still. Other comments? Councillor Solta.
Madam Mayor, just to say there's a transportation meeting with the ACRD in that on the 22nd of this month, and staff will be there, some, I believe. So anyways, so if anybody has any problems with pedestrian safety issues in that, who should they contact? Should they contact the works yard? Is there a contact we should, if they have information regarding safety concerns?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. We would ask first, I guess the best point of contact would be to send an email at engineering@portalberni.ca. We can take a look at any concerns or complaints, and if there's something we can do through operational means without requiring any capital project request or budget, we certainly try to take care of those as fast as we can. So.
Super, because I was at a meeting this week or last week, and there was some concerns, so hopefully they're watching and it will be forwarded to you. The other one regarding benches, when do you see them being installed? Will they be later in the summer or early spring? And on the Key to Key pathway, will we see benches there? Because I've had elderly people who've walked the path saying, is there going to be seating so we can take that pause? So just kind of concerned on that.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Solda. Regarding the benches, the public benches, we have now adopted standards as far as what the construction will look like and how we want to see them installed in a safe manner. Part of the transportation master plan ties in with transit and looking at other areas as well as where the primary routes are around the city and where we want to have these benches placed. Regarding the Key to Key trail, I know that we are currently looking at adding some signage for the mileage markers along the trail, as well as looking at putting in additional seating platforms in different areas. I don't have at my fingertips the exact time frame on that, but it is being investigated at this time.
And one more thing. Go ahead. Sorry. And when do we look at getting some of the benches up in spring? Are we looking at? Did I miss that?
Yes, again, through the chair, thank you for the question. We're just going through final deliberations of determining budget on the mileage markers and additional funding that we can put towards having these seating platforms and how often and where we can put them.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for the report. Would somebody like to move receipt? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And we have no bylaws today, so we'll move on to correspondence for action. Item number 1, we have a letter dated January 5th, 2025 from Ridgeview Health and Performance requesting access to McLean Mill National Historic Site for the annual McLean Mill 10K. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this one?
Thank you. This is a great economic driver because it brings a lot of people to our community. So I'd like to move that council authorize Ridgeview Health and Performance access to McLean Mill National Historic Site on Sunday, April 6, 2025 from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the purpose of a 10K running event starting at the McLean Mill and following the route as outlined in the attached map subject to the notification of emergency services in BC Transit, consultation with all affected businesses and residents, provision of a traffic safety plan completed by a certified professional, including qualified traffic control personnel as required, and provision of a standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million.
Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments on this? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 2, we have the Wounded Warrior Run BC. And this is a letter requesting access to city streets for the Wounded Warrior Run 2025. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that council authorized Wounded Warrior Run BC access to the city streets on Thursday, February 27th, 2025, for the purpose of a Wounded Warrior Run from Highway 4, Johnson Road, to Gertrude Street, to Rogers Street, to Victoria Quay, ending at the Port Alberni Legion Branch number 293, subject to the notification of emergency services and BC Transit, consultation with all affected businesses, residents, provision of traffic safety plan completed by a certified professional, including qualified traffic control personnel as required, and provision of safety or provision of standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
Madam Mayor, they're also asking for staff and council to, or mayor and council to attend. Did you want to appoint someone?
I don't think we need to appoint anyone. I think as many people who are able could attend likely. In the past, I think we have sent more than one. Maybe we could just ask staff to reach out and see who's available to participate. Great. Thank you. Thanks for catching that. And item number 3, we have AVICC, third call for resolutions. Would anyone like to speak to this? Sarah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, so this is the third call for resolutions from AVICC regarding their annual convention, which takes place April 11th through 13th. So resolutions are due by the deadline of February 6, 2025. So if council would like to put forth any recommendations, staff would be happy to prepare those in advance of the deadline. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We will continue on. Yep, motion to receive from Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And on to proclamations. Item number 1, we have an email dated December 18th, 2024, requesting March 26th, 2025 be proclaimed as International Purple Day, and that is from the BC Epilepsy Society. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council on behalf of the BC Epilepsy Society proclaim March 26th, 2025 as International Purple Day in Port Alberni.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And on to correspondence for information. I will go to our corporate officer for a summary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have a number of items, including BC Salmon Farmers Association providing their transition plan process update and fiscal update. The Loaves and Fishes Community Food Bank Society requesting a support letter for their funding for their warehouse. MP Johns has sent a letter regarding the benefits of waste biomass conversion. School District 70 has provided information as to their 2025 representative appointments to the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission. UBCM has provided their Community Works Fund payment notice. AVICC submitted their draft Salmon Aquaculture Transition Plan for BC. ACRD has requested that we provide our Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee 2025 representative appointment. The Office of the Lieutenant Governor provided their year-end report. ACRD has included their highlights for November and December 2024. We received a thank you for the meetings at UBCM from the Ministry of Health. And lastly, the Advisory Planning Commission meeting minutes of October 17th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any items councillors would like to speak to? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was wondering if you could also write a letter of support from Gord Johns regarding the economic and environmental benefits of waste biomass conversion for heat and energy, just in order to support this initiative, because we are a forestry community.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and I know that he spoke to this at the forum that we had with the Minister of Forest provincially as well. There was a lot of interest and support in the room and appreciation for that advocacy. So would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we write a letter of support for Gord Johns regarding the economic and environmental benefits of waste biomass conversion for heat and energy.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any questions or comments on this piece? Okay, seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And any other items councillors would like to speak to? Seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt? Motion to receive from Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And no report from in camera, so councillor and regional district reports. Any items councillors would like to speak to or highlight? Seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. We're just having a little internal thing over here for people who can't see on how many motions I think Councillor Mealy is going to make today. We're keeping count. All right, everybody's sharing. New business, item number 1, we have fire department, first responder service levels and recommendation from the December 9th Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Patola, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council direct administration to reduce the medical first responder level of service to only respond to calls coded red or purple, or where British Columbia Emergency Health Services requires assistance with rescue, access, or lifting a patient.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Discussion. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do like the motion. I support it as worded because I think we need to keep finances in focus alongside of support for our community and services to the population that lives here. So while I'm not personally entirely convinced that we should be responding to lift assists or that we as a fire department are the best responder for a lift assist. It seems to me if we need an extra set of arms to lift someone, 4 people on a $1.5 million apparatus is a little overkill, but what needs to be done needs to be done. So I will support it at this point in time, but I'm saying that with the proviso that nobody is surprised in the future when I make further suggestions for focusing the fire department's tasks on those that are essential to our community and saving a few dollars along the way.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Dane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's important to mention to any members of the public who might be tuning into this, who maybe haven't seen previous meetings, that this particular topic has been quite thoroughly discussed, and I mean it's a big one, and it sort of remains to be seen exactly how this will play out in the long term. But we've definitely put a lot of consideration and time and discussion into this, and I think we've arrived at something that I think is good. I don't think it's by any means a silver bullet for the problems that we're facing, but I think it's a step. And so I'm going to be supporting it.
Thank you. Other comments? All right. Well, I will just say that I remain torn on this change. I think I appreciate the reasons it's coming forward, and I think the scope of service that our fire department has response to it has drastically expanded over the year, and that has added to the cost of the service. I'm all for controlling the cost of the service and looking for ways to ultimately free up those resources. However, I think my ultimate feeling remains that we have a resource. We have, 4+ firefighters or fire resources. I know some of those are maybe the chief deputy, fire prevention, but we typically have a minimum of 4 resources on staff at any time. And if there is somebody in our community, in their home or otherwise, who is in need of medical support and BC Ambulance is unable to attend right away, my personal feeling is if we have a resource that's able to attend, they should. We're paying that resource regardless. I understand it's not the intended use of the fire department, and I completely agree that sending a $1.5 million truck to respond to these medical calls is not ideal. However, I think ultimately I will vote against this motion because I don't feel that we should leave a person in our community waiting without medical care when they could have a first responder there. So I know that we are dealing with a significant burden of, or challenge with the burden of number of calls that our department is getting. I understand it's not maintainable. Something needs to change, and this is a step. I suggest we try it, we evaluate. I would like to know at the end of like a 6-month period, what calls did we not go to that we could have. But ultimately, I personally just think that if we have a resource available, we should use it. So when we asked what type of calls would not be responded to by our fire department as a result of this and would be delayed in getting medical care in their home, I wasn't completely satisfied with the answer. I heard somebody with a broken hip possibly who could be left in their home for hours until the BC ambulance is able to get to them if they're busy. I don't think we should leave a senior in our community unable to have medical care when there is medical care that could come. Now, I recognize they can't transport and there's lots of complications, but there were some more serious examples given as well, and I just struggle with the idea of for potential cost savings, and we know there's no direct cost savings or immediate cost savings with this. I struggle with why we would not utilize the resources that we have. So I'm going to vote against this, but I do appreciate where it's coming from, and ultimately that the cost of the service is challenging, and we're trying to look for ways to control it over time. Councillor Solda.
Well, Madam Mayor, this has been a long time discussion with other councils too in the past, and that is why we purchased, I forgot what the name of the little truck that we purchased to send firefighters on these medical calls instead of sending the fire truck. And then it switched over, and that was the reason that we purchased that, so we could send firefighters to go and assist on medical calls. And where down the road it changed, and the fire truck now goes out. And I understand the reasoning and the argument on it is if there is a call for a fire, they can respond right away. But we did try to look at costs in the past, and maybe that's where we need to go back instead of going forward, to go back to that kind of response, taking the little truck out and to firefighters go and help with the medical. So those are my comments on that anyways, Madam.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm like you, I'm a little torn on this, especially for personal reasons, as my mother probably wouldn't be around last February because of the treatment that she got from the fire department. And again, we just saw somebody needed a very quick response at a local event. I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm willing to support the motion at this time, but I do agree. I'd like to see in 6 months what the change is. But I'm with you on that, Madam Mayor, in saying that if there is somebody in our community that needs assistance and we have the resources, they should go to that and have that assistance. So, but I'm willing to give it a shot. But I am hopeful, and maybe we could even include it where we could review it in 6 months' time.
Thank you. And maybe I can ask the chief, since he's here, and I understand that you are not fire dispatch, and so you can't necessarily give a 100% answer on this, but just taking the situation that happened at Totem, I understand was somebody having a seizure. Would a seizure that is not life-threatening be responded to?
Yeah, so there's a number of, as was explained by Mr. Elzinga from BCHS at the Committee of the Whole meeting, there's a whole, I guess, a pick tree that the dispatchers will go through. And so they'll evaluate, everything from age to past history to, if substances may or may not have been taken. I'm not saying any of that with regards to this specific instance, but through all of that, it will spit out a appropriate dispatch for that type of a call. So in that specific instance, I believe that was a red call that was dispatched, that was being spoken about. There are other calls that have been spoken about in these chambers that were orange delays. And so, yeah, it really just depends on how those questions are answered. And sometimes the questions aren't, the answers to those questions aren't well known by the person that's standing there on the street or phoning 911. So sometimes the accuracy isn't 100% as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really have a hard time with generally is like we don't know exactly what the outcome of this change is. And I know I've shared this before, but I have a child with epilepsy, and when I phone 911 for her seizures, the first thing they ask is, does she have a seizure condition? And when I say yes, I know that reduces the severity of the call. I think there's a lot of people who have calls to 911 that are not necessarily life-threatening, but they are still important medical calls in our community that need a response. So yeah, I think that, at minimum we evaluate this, but I don't know what the ability of us to actually get really thorough information back will be. And I think we should keep that in mind because those calls aren't coming to the city, they're coming to 911, and how much information is 911 going to give us at the end of 6 months about the calls that they did not forward on to our department. So I don't know if that's something that we will get thorough reporting back on or not, but I think it's all just worth us really giving good consideration to. We have a resource available for people in our community. Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Dame.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we just went through that at the arena actually with a player who couldn't get back up, and the person on the phone was on one side of the arena. I'm on a headset, so they're asking me questions that 911 was asking and judging the severity of the injury, and is the person still awake and responsive and stuff like that. So so there is quite a load of questions that come through, and they have to evaluate, of course. So and of course the people who are on our end of 911 have to try to give as best information as possible to get that right code.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And yeah, I share all of these concerns as well, and this has been a difficult decision and a difficult discussion because people's lives are affected by these things. But I think it's been generally acknowledged that the system is not working the way it was intended to right now, and at some point something's got to give, and we have very limited tools in order to gain traction in this. And one of the tools that we do have is to control the service level that we offer, and the amount of allowing other levels of government to put their responsibility on us. And so the reason that I support this motion is because I can't control the level of paramedic service in our community. I can only contribute my voice as a councillor to controlling the level of, service our fire department provides in this area. And so using that mechanism, I sincerely hope that this doesn't adversely affect the lives of the people in Port Alberni. It is a risk, but it is a risk that I don't believe is sustainable. Like what we're currently doing isn't sustainable. So when we say that we do have the capacity to do it, certainly right now we do, but I'm not convinced that that's a sustainable capacity. I feel that is something that is very quickly becoming something that is a burden that cannot be shouldered by our community any longer. And like I said earlier, this is maybe a small step. It's not going to solve the problem. I certainly hope that the paramedics are able to continue to provide good service and save the lives of the people in town who require that. And also our fire department is going to continue to attend purple and red calls, and that should be remembered. But right now, I just think that something has to give, and this is something that we are able to have an impact on. So,
Thank you, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was the same mindset as you are when this first came up to council, and I was very concerned because conditions do deteriorate very rapidly, so I was concerned about if that happened and and the firefighters weren't called. However, I was assured by, I think it was a CAO, can't remember what his title was, the BCHS that day, at their committee of the whole meeting, and he said there's callbacks, they stay on the line, and if there's any deterioration, they do follow up with the firefighters to come and do those calls. And they've already implemented just coming on red and purple, and there hasn't been any calls so far that have been concerning where people have suffered when they shouldn't have been. But I think let's give it a try and see if it's going to help the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Patola.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I just want to go back to, first of all, I'd like to see the paramedic service come before council. Just to explain how their service works. We have never really had them here that I remember, or have we?
We just had them here.
Well,
That was that long.
that's how much I remember. Okay. Yeah, it could be. We'll use that as my excuse. But I would like them to come back. And I think the provincial government needs to hire more paramedics in our community instead of having, I don't know how many is at the office now. I'm sure their service calls have gone up and everything. It would be great to have them back again and just give an update for the public. We have a lot of new members of our community who have no idea, and it would be great to have them back. Regarding the firefighters, when the chief comes before us and asks for more firefighters because of burnout and that, is this a contribution being on a medical calls and stuff like that? Because we're out there, does that affect your requests, or how does that work?
Yes, are you withdrawing the request for additional firefighters if we pass this?
No. But also, yes, it does contribute to burnout. I mean, the call volume has, gone up from 2019 until 2024 has gone up more than 75%. The number of medical calls between 2019 and 2024 has gone up by more than 120%. The prevalence of overdoses in the community has obviously skyrocketed during that same period of time. And so, yeah, all of it adds, one more straw on the camel's back, so to speak, and certainly does contribute to burnout. The overall staffing request is a conversation I'm happy to dive into. It is larger than just first responders, though.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Dame that currently proceeding to increase funding to a system that is not achieving its objectives is not effective, and something needs to change. And I am quite happy to entertain any suggestions for change. But as we are right now, we're enabling the demise of a broken system that continues to break. And I think we have a lot of anecdotal stories about individuals that have suffered an injury of some type and been provided for by the community. I think that that's a really good description of the community of Port Alberni. We are a community that wants to help. We help our neighbors, we lend a hand. But we should note that the reason we send 4 staff on an engine apparatus to a medical call is because the policy exists to preserve our firefighting capacity, not because 4 individuals and an engine apparatus are needed, but so that while the fire department is doing this other thing of medical calls, they are able and ready to respond to firefighting duties. That's the primary purpose of the fire department. And we've cobbled together different policies and different ways of managing how we as a giving community can assist the paramedics and how we can help out. There comes a point in time, though, when you can't help anymore because you have taken on all of your own duties and too much of somebody else's duties. So this is a first step in a restructuring so that we can maintain our firefighting capacity of 46 calls a year and somehow help out with the other 1,800 calls of first responder. Thanks.
Thank you. Any final comments? Was the motion moved and seconded? I can't recall. Thank you. Okay. Motion is moved and seconded. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? And opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. Sorry?
Sorry,
Councillor
Madam Mayor,
Mayor.
just, I know we did discuss it, but would there be a possibility to have a review in a short time of this?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Chief Owens, maybe you could speak to, I think just at a high level, would 911 provide us the information of calls we are not called to? Is that public information or would it be available?
Yeah, they can provide the number of calls that we didn't respond to, but I don't know that we'll get into the nature of the calls and how many of those calls were then subsequently upgraded from an orange to a red, those sorts of things. We could definitely get the number of calls that we no longer respond to.
Okay, I think, Councillor Mealy, did you want to make a motion? And even if it's just vague for now, to check back on this in 6 months for reporting.
Absolutely. I move that we would come back in 6 months' time and receive a report on the findings.
Thanks, and I'll second that. And Councillor Patola.
I wonder if that wouldn't just be information included in the chief's quarterly report on a usual basis.
I think if it can be available routinely for the chief's quarterly report, that would be great. Chief Owens, are you okay if we don't actually make a motion on that, but rather you just look to include it? Let us know if it's not available for whatever reason.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, then motion rescinded. Wonderful. Okay, then let's move on to item number 2, Fire Department 2025 Capital Financial Plan Implications and Recommendations from the December 9th, 2024 meeting. And I will go to Councillor Patola. Would you like to read these?
I would love to. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move, I'm going to do them individually. Yeah, let's do them individually. Yep. So, Madam Mayor, I move that council direct administration to add $54,600 in 2025 from taxation to the $65,000 allocated from IRF to purchase one set of PFAS free turnout gear for each PAFD employee.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments? Council, I know that one of us, I can't remember who, Councillor Mealy possibly, heard about some funding. Councillor Mealy, go ahead.
Oh, that's right, and it was directed to Mr. Fox, and what it came back is we are not a volunteer fire department. That's where the funding was coming from, so
Okay,
thank you very
thank
much. But kudos to Machosen Fire Department for giving me that idea.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, discussion on this? Councillor Dame.
Sure, I'll just go ahead and say that I think that this is sort of just a necessary step that has to be made. We can't have our firefighters wearing carcinogenic clothing, equipment, safety equipment. So yeah, I think it's just something that we have to support.
Absolutely. Okay, motion has been moved and seconded. Seeing no additional comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And Councillor Solda, did you want to read the next one?
Madam Mayor, I move that council direct administration to defer $42,000 allocated in the 2025 capital project plan to 2029 for the fueling station and defer $128,961 allocated in the 2025 capital project plan to the 2026 and add $350,000 for the replacement of the 2006 Ford F550 rescue truck number 8.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Okay, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dame, and discussion. Councillor Patola.
I think council would benefit from some further discussion about the purpose for the F550 rescue truck, simply because I know that, I believe this is the piece of equipment that Councillor Solda has referred to that was originally designated for medical calls and now is not used for medical calls. So I think we would benefit from information as to how that vehicle is used and how we can ensure that we provide the necessary apparatus for the purposes that the fire department has.
Thank you. Why don't we make an amendment to remove just the last line and add the $350,000 piece, so that we're just discussing the deferral of the two items for now, and then
I'll make that
council
motion.
could. Thank you. So motion to amend from Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Solda. So this is just really to split out the motions, but not actually to split, make a separate motion after. On the motion to amend, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And any comments on that first piece, which is just to defer the items from 2025 to 2026? Seeing none, then on the motion as amended, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And does anyone want to make a motion now around the $350,000 replacement, even just from additional information or a report? Councillor Patola.
Madam Mayor, again, I don't know if this is the right word. Can we defer that item to, well, a reasonably soon meeting, perhaps the next meeting of regular council, just to have further information with regards to what that vehicle would be used for in the future, so that we get the right one. I'm a little reticent to second guess and act as counsel in divvying up things that we don't know about, to say we know better and you can have this but can't have that. The fire department is well skilled in recommendations for what is appropriate for a professional response. So I do think that just some more information on that would be helpful.
Thank you. Just to our corporate officer, if you had a comment.
My apologies if I misheard this, but the motion was read and seconded, and then it was a motion to amend, which we passed, but I don't think we reread main motion as amended.
We did.
You did? Okay, my
Yeah,
apologies.
We did. Yeah, no, thank you on that, though. And so I agree. I'm not sure it's necessarily a motion to defer, but I think it's just a motion to request additional information and defer to a future meeting. So we could have that as a motion to defer. I think that's fine. I'll take that as a motion, and seconded by Councillor Solda. And when that comes back, if we could just have even a brief report on the history of that truck and future use of it, I think that would be really valuable. And I don't know that we really need much details on why it needs to be replaced. I'm sure, as Councillor Patola has said, if it is being asked to be replaced, it does need to be replaced. But I think we do need to understand if there's still a business case for that piece of apparatus or not. Councillor Solda.
I actually would like a little bit of history of what it's cost us to run as and maintenance, as big repairs. I don't care about oil changes and that. That's customary. Also, the other thing too is I would like to know mileage too, or kilometers on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I did ask these questions at the last committee of the whole meeting, just that it's a diesel, it's an 06. It should go through its oil changes. It's a 6 liter or a 6.4. So if it's not bulletproof, those things are going to blow up. So, but I would like to, I'd like to get this information and heck, maybe even take a look at it ourselves. I mean, it wouldn't mean much. Okay, well, it'd mean maybe something to me just to take a look at it and to see. But definitely, if it's not being used for its intended use, then we need to either find another use for it or sell it off or replace it with the right vehicle.
Okay, So we've got a motion to defer and a request for additional information when it comes back. We'll leave it to staff to determine when is most appropriate to bring it back, but some point within budget, obviously. Any additional comments? Okay, then that has been moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Great. And then the last motion here, Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council direct administration to refer discussion on the purchase and subscription of 2 Starlink satellite systems to the Alberni-Clearcut Regional District Emergency Program Executive Committee.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Councillor Haggard.
This item is actually on the agenda for Wednesday's meeting. So I don't know if you still go ahead and approve the motion because it is on the agenda to be for discussion.
At the ACRD. Perfect. Councillor Solda.
And this has been at the Emergency Program Executive Committee meeting, and we've had that discussion, and we would like to see it on all fire trucks, so especially when they have to go to Bamfield and different areas. So it's important for communication. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, seeing no additional comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 2, RCMP body-worn cameras, implementation, financial plan implications, and recommendations from the Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Solda, would you like to read this?
Madam Mayor, and are we going to do the whole thing as one or break it down, or do you want it all?
You can do, well, I would do each one separately.
Okay, sure. I'll move that Council direct administration to include in the following in the 2025-2029 financial plan. Number 1, line 22122, operational service level increase for the purpose of a new position, RCMP electronic disclosure clerk. And A, 2025, 96,803. B, 2026, 1,001, 100,001, 905. And 2027, $102,085. And 2028, 104, 846. And 2029, 107, 698.
Thank you, Councillor Solda. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. And any discussion, questions? Okay. Seeing none. Actually, I guess my only question is, and I've already asked, is this required? And the answer I've heard back is yes, it is required if we receive body-worn cameras. So I guess then, is this accounting for a full year of 2025? Is it prorated for taxation this year? And when do we actually expect to receive body-worn cameras and take on this person?
Thanks for the question. Yes, it is essential to deal with the technology when we receive it at the RCMP detachment. I believe that the 2025 budgeted amount is at the full year, but we can amend that to estimate when the person would be hired.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be ideal if it does look like it may be prorated slightly, but assuming we are not going to probably have that person on right away, ideally we would prorate that. I'm sure it will be reasonably minimal, but just to be accurate. Okay, so with that, Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question to the CAO through you, Madam Mayor, does this also include the training for this disclosure clerk? Because, I mean, there's going to be some training on these cameras and stuff.
I don't have all the information on that. My understanding is that the RCMP actually provide the training for the records, what has to be kept and what has to be disseminated.
Thank you. So with that, motion has been moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? None opposed, carried. And item number 2, Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that 2025 general capital expenditure for the purpose of a secure police equipment room renovation in the amount of $150,000.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Seeing no comments. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And third one, Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I will defer, I move to defer RCMP boardroom upgrades included in the 2025 financial plan in the amount of $17,000 to support funding the storage room renovation.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. I just have a question. Wasn't there 2 items that we had intended to defer? I think the second one maybe was a $40,000 item, maybe cabinets or something separate from this. I'm sure there was 2 items in 2025 that were presented to us to defer. I just don't have the budget in front of me.
I believe Sarah's looking that up right now, but I don't remember the other part being referred. I'm not even sure if it was supported. But my memory isn't very good right now on that one, so
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just looking at the Committee of the Whole paperwork here, it said there was advanced disclosure training that is set for 2026, but I don't see it being deferred, but that is the other line underneath RCMP electronic disclosure clerk wages.
I'll look back and, oh yeah, here it is. So it was boardroom office reno, 17,000, and cabinet, 16,000. So both of those were noted at the Committee of the Whole, but only one of them made it into a motion written here. So it looks like we have the storage room renovation, but we are, yeah, so I don't know, the budget says boardroom office renovation and cabinet. So I'm not sure which of these items that actually is, but there was a $17,000 item and a $16,000 item included in the 5-year financial plan. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to go into the report, says the financial plan does include $16,000 for cabinets, in parentheses, to house the body-worn cameras. There's also $17,000 for RCMP boardroom renovation included in the 2025 financial plan. This could be reallocated to this renovation has been determined that the boardroom upgrade plan does not coincide with the detachment's current need for the workspace availability. So the $16,000 for cabinets was to house the body-worn cameras.
And that is what the $150,000 secure police equipment room renovation is. So I would imagine we can remove that $16,000 from the budget and defer.
Or that it's included already in 150.
through the chair, when we bring back, we'll be bringing the financial plan. We can look at that time and make sure that we have more information on it for you.
Sure. It's just definitely when we made these motions, 2 items were discussed that they would be deferred, not one. So we can pass the one for today, but I think definitely with the intent to pass the second one as it was suggested to us that we could. And additionally, I know that we are tentatively putting this $150,000 into our budget, but I would like additional information on what's being done for $150,000. That is a pretty significant amount to be doing a renovation on a quite a nice new building, not new, but reasonably, City of Port Alberni new for sure. So I know we have had some minor information to start with, but I would like a bit more of a scope of work for that project before we make it too far through. Councillor Mealy.
Just really quickly, the report says it's $110,000 for the renovation of secure police equipment room, additional $40,000 for planning / engineering, design, procurement, and other associated project costs.
Yeah, thank you. Just a bit more of a, I think, idea of the project for sure. Okay, I'm just going to amend this to also include the $16,000 that was noted since the intent of the motion at Committee of the Whole was for both. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments? Okay, Councillor Dame.
Sorry, clarification question. Was that 16,000 that was for cabinets to house the body cameras?
Yes,
Okay.
it was. Except it was suggested in that report that could be deferred because it would be included in the other project cost. And then just in this motion, only one of the items was captured to be deferred. So we were specifically told both items could be deferred. Okay. Seeing no more comments on the amendment, all in favor? Carried. And on the motion as amended, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Canadian Mental Health Association, Parks Caretaker Residences. And Councillor Patola appears to be recusing himself for reasons same as stated at the last Committee of the Whole meeting.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, point of order. Could we have that? I know we know, but the public may not know the reasons for him recusing
That's right.
himself.
So at the last, Councillor Patola, he's on the board at Canadian Mental Health Association, and thank you, Councillor Mealy, and he did state it at the last meeting. Okay, so these are our recommendations from the December 9th Committee of the Whole meeting as well. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the first one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council authorize renewal of the lease agreement between the City of Port Alberni and the Canadian Mental Health Association, Port Alberni, for a 6-year term of city parks caretaker units located at Roger Creek Park, Russell Park, Williamson Park, Blair Park, Klitza Park, and Paper Mill Dam Park.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Before we go on, I just wanted to kind of seek a little bit of clarification. I know that we have the specific Paper Mill Dam direction below, but I know that at our last meeting as well, we did talk about, and I think we didn't fully put into a motion, that we would not undertake any major updates to any of the facilities unless they specifically came with a request to council. So I'm just wondering if we really should be amending the motion. It does, but the discussion that we had at the last Committee of the Whole was that we would not make major investments into any of the caretaker residences, and that specifically we would look to just wait out Paper Mill Dam until the end of its life. But basically we would change the level of maintenance or not the level of maintenance, but level of investment going forward on the rest of the caretaker residences. Council, any direction?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that was a long and challenging discussion that we had on this one. We were all really tired, so I don't know if we landed exactly where we wanted to on this, but I think that did seem to be where the discussion was going, that we wanted to avoid further future investment in these facilities, but that there was no reason to just immediately demolish them, but that we might as well use them until they needed investment, and then have another look at what we wanted to do at that point. So yes.
Yeah, and that's my memory as well. So I think that the motion we have here doesn't necessarily capture that piece. It does clearly for the Paper Mill Dam, and I think we all understand that that residence is a bit further along in terms of likely needing additional more major repairs, but I think that there was a discussion and a willingness to certainly not tear down any of the caretaker residences, but to stop making any major investments in them unless something is brought to council on a one-off to determine if we'd like to or not. Corporate officer.
Yes, if council would like, we can absolutely amend this motion or make a second motion before item B if you'd like to make it as a standalone.
Madam Mayor, may I suggest that we make that amendment and at the next motion and just add the other parks?
Yeah, I think that's a good, easy suggestion to fix this. Perfect. Okay, great. Then on the renewal of the lease agreement, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And let's get, oh no, they're still with, yeah. Okay, he'll have to stay out for this one as well. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. I'd like to move that council direct administration that no further investments be made to their caretaker residence located at Roger Creek Park, Russell Park, Williamson Park, Blair Park, Klitza Park, and Paper Mill Dam Park. However, that the washrooms continue to be maintained.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Mealy, I believe. Thank you. Perfect. Any discussion on this? Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Mayor, just regarding no further investments, yes, you're right. We did have all this discussion in the past. But I'm just kind of curious to know when it comes to anything to do with safety on these buildings, also aesthetics. Aesthetically, you know, some of, like, Paper Mill Dam's way out in the Beaver Creek. But the whole thing is aesthetically, like some of the parks, like just to clean it up, you know, that's really important that to keep that, because if we don't put some investments on like fixing the roof or just on the outside and stuff like that, you know what happens to buildings, derelict buildings, then people, oh, let's just go graffiti them up. So I'm just kind of curious to know how much that we are actually going to take a step backwards or take a step away.
Maybe we'll ask our Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, and Culture, to come up and answer that question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A little bit tricky off the cuff to provide council with solid numbers. I will remind council there was some confusion about previous projects that have been done, for instance, at Roger Creek Park. So I think Councillor Solder brings up a good point that getting some clear direction from council on is the case of, so as I recall the previous discussion, it was Paper Mill Dam is by far in the worst condition of the residences. So the idea that we would cease investing any dollars into Paper Mill Dam unless they were needed for safety purposes for the end of life of that building. And then the rest of the structures were in fairly good condition. So as far as a specific number that it would require to maintain that same status quo with the other 5 residences, staff would need to come back with some numbers.
So, Madam Mayor, I have no problem with Paper Mill Dam because we've already had that discussion, frank discussion on that and where we're going to do, what we're going to do. But the others, I do have some issues regarding all that, and I would like staff to come back. So the way the motion stands now, I will vote against it, but I have, and to come back with a report. I'd like to see a report on our other ones that are in our other parks.
We did have a pretty thorough report at the Committee of the Whole, and I think that where we got to, my memory, really is that there wasn't a lot of major repairs coming up on those. So we continue to maintain them, just very minimal maintenance. We're not, doing new roofs, doing new floors. We're fixing them as we would with any building if something is broken, but that we're not making improvements to them. Paper Mill Dam, we are waiting out its end of life, basically, because there's no point in demolishing something that is still a suitable home, but we are also recognizing that it is near the end of life. So I guess the motion as it's written, we may want to add in, we continue to do routine maintenance on the facilities, but we are not making any improvements to them. And that's where I felt that we landed at the last Committee of the Whole. Was more of a recognition that Paper Mill Dam is further along, that, we would need to make some more major updates to it, but the rest we could just continue to maintain as always. So we certainly are not allowing them to become derelict buildings by any means, but we are not updating those as they need to be updated. And if something needed to be done, a major repair, it would be brought to council.
I would support that, Madam Mayor, if we add that.
I threw my pen accidentally. It wasn't an intentional pen throwing. So why don't we just amend the motion slightly, just to say, and that we continue to do routine maintenance with no improvements.
And they come back to council.
Yeah, any improvement or any improvement requests would come to council. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I will make that amendment. Would somebody like to second the amendment? Councillor Solda, thank you. Any additional comments? Seeing none on the motion, on the amendment, all in favor? Carried, and on the motion as amended, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll get Councillor Patola back. All right, thank you. We'll move on to Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society and Railway Operations for 2025. And this is a recommendation from Committee of the Whole as well. Councillor Dame, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council direct administration to not extend the railway operation and maintenance agreement with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society until an environmental insurance policy can be obtained.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Patola, and discussion. Councillor Mealy.
First one off the bat. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate that. So this was a bit of a topic of discussion at the last, with a couple of members of the IHS and the railway, and there are people here in attendance today to kind of have this discussion if need be. I can't support this at this time. We just had probably the most successful train season. This, for starting it back up and everything that this community enjoyed this year and beyond. I believe in talking to the APR that there is coverage, and I'd have to ask, but they do have some coverage as well, and also having an understanding that if there is anything on the rail in the discussions that I've had, that they would be quick to jump on it from this point forward. So I would be voting vigorously against this motion, as I think that we've come so far in such a little time, and the benefits this community got and beyond far outweigh the risk in my case, in my mind, especially if there is a level of insurance or a level of coverage that we do have through the APR.
Thank you very much. And I would agree with you on a lot of those points for sure. I would really like to see this operation supported. I think it added huge value to our community this year. And I know that families, locally, visitors, it was a huge success for this year, and I'd like to continue to support it. That said, I do think that the nervousness around this comes from previous oil spill that we have had, and so I think that is something not to be ignored. And when we say the benefit outweighs the risk, not necessarily at $1.25 million, I think was that oil spill. So I think that is a very significant risk that we need to make sure we're making a mindful decision on. Now, I think why I lean toward being comfortable is that our staff, and in conjunction with IHS volunteers, have done a lot of work, mitigating the risk that exists. So we know that oil spill happened because the bunker oil was there. And while we certainly can't guarantee that we can oversee everything that the APR and IHS do, I know that we have worked with them to review their locations, to look at what possible risks may exist, and that we've gotten ourselves as comfortable, I think, as we could. And we're certainly, I would say, in a much better position than we were for knowing what risks exist and mitigating the risks that exist than we were when that oil spill happened a few years ago. So my personal point would be I would really like to see this continue. I think it was a huge success, and I think that staff and volunteers working together have done a really good job to make sure that the likelihood of any kind of environmental cleanup in this sense would be very minimal. Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just quickly, and I totally understand when you talk about the $1.2 million, that was out at the McLean Mill. I merely talk about the risk that we have on the city-owned rail, and if we just talk about that, then I believe that it outweighs that risk.
Absolutely. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've made my stance clear in the past that I am not comfortable with taking on this risk, and that lack of comfort continues. However, I have moved a lot closer to being torn on the issue. As I've learned more, as I've, obviously, yeah, I agree with everybody. It was in many ways a very, very successful first year, and congratulations to everyone involved. It did add a lot of value to the community. But as you yourself said, the risk that we have seen in other locations in the past, it can have some very severe consequences for the community that, as far as I'm concerned, are just unacceptable moving forward. So I guess for me, the sticking point is that, I'm a fan of what has been done right now, but I'm not necessarily a train guy in terms of I don't necessarily have the knowledge to understand the risks involved. All I know is that this is an industrial sort of situation where there's a lot of very old machines, and I do not question the knowledge or expertise of those involved. However, it is volunteers, and it is, I'm sure, challenging to work with old machinery in a way that does add a certain level of risk. That I just wish that I could have more personal assurance that this risk was being mitigated, and I just don't have a real understanding of that. That's my hesitance in the past. So having said all that, I think that I would be willing to support this, but I would want to caution the IHS that moving forward, it would really relieve a lot of stress and concern if they could continue to just be very active in keeping council up to date on their inspection process and those sorts of things, right? So yeah, I think I'm prepared to support this today, but it's certainly with some hesitance and concern.
Thank you. Before I go to the next speaker, I'm just wondering, Willa, would you be, or is there another manager or director who would be responsible for overseeing, for being basically like the point person for the agreement?
So, Madam Mayor, generally as far as the point person with the agreement itself would likely be our corporate officer. As far as the operation itself would likely be our manager of culture.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering, do we have within agreement requirements for reporting to us or for, inspection of a few things quarterly by one of our staff members? And if not, the agreement is paused. So if there is a violation, if our manager of culture was to inspect the sites quarterly and found something that was out of compliance with the set of standards that we have created, that the agreement would immediately be halted. I'm just wondering if we have oversight built into this that could provide additional comfort, recognizing that it is a group of volunteers and that we do not have direct oversight over the operations. But I think important to bring this back to that we are just talking about the environmental insurance policy and that the other insurance policy is in place for operations and everything else. So we're really just talking about what are the environmental risks that could exist here. I understand that to be things like oil spills. So do we have a process in place for oversight?
I do believe, without having the agreement and being able to review it fully, that there is some language in there upon request that we could receive reporting. However, if council wishes, we can certainly take a look and do a more fulsome review to see if there's any recommendations we'd like to bring forward for a more fulsome framework within that.
Thank you. So I think that is something that would give me comfort if we had a specific list of places and things that we are inspecting quarterly to ensure that where we believe there's not bunker oil being stored on site, that there isn't, or where I know that when we originally worked with this group, we did assessments on some of the locations to ensure that to understand what the risks were, and there was I think a lot of confidence in some of the changes that had been made to clean up some of the spaces and reduce the risk. And I would feel more comfortable if within our agreement we had regular inspections built in so that we could ensure that those risks remain mitigated. So maybe that's something that if we do, or maybe we could put that in a motion if we do move forward with something other than not proceeding. Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to congratulate the railway on a very successful year. My only disappointment was I wasn't quick enough to get tickets for the Santa train. But I think you guys did a great job. However, nobody plans for an oil spill. It's not something that we think is ever going to happen, but unfortunately it does happen. So I need some comfort that we're doing everything that we can in order to mitigate any kind of environmental tragedy. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to do a mitigation plan yourselves for regular inspections or whatever you have to do to give us that comfort level. And then if we have staff that commits to regular inspections, and I think they should be more than quarterly, I'm thinking monthly, just to give us that comfort level that we're doing everything we can in order to mitigate any kind of tragedy, because we want you to continue. It's been a great fun event for the community and for tourists alike. So again, congratulations, but we have to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent anything from happening.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I was going to ask if we could get a representative perhaps from the APR to talk about the coverage that they do have or that we were talking about. I don't have it fully on me, but maybe after Councillor Patola, or I would want to take away, but I'd love to hear from the APR on what exactly they do have in place.
Absolutely. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think part of the issue here is that nobody knows anything. So Councillor Mealy's suggestion that the APR can tell us what insurance they do have. I've read a number of reports that have been given to council on the APR and what insurance they do have, what insurance is required, why it's required. That information has all been put before council. And that's why council came up with the decision about a year ago that we needed an environmental insurance policy. And there is not an environmental insurance policy. So we've had this discussion in depth with representatives from the APR, and I'm quite happy to have them come and tell us again what they do and don't have. Strangely, the part of the people that don't know anything isn't just council, but there is, I think, an overabundance of faith being placed in members of the APR that they know and or do things that we're not really sure. They have certainly proven that they are, as a group of individuals, very capable of running a railway as a tourist attraction this summer, and they did a great job of that. Are they experts in insurance? I don't think so. Are they experts in the assets that are associated with the APR? I'm not even sure of that. Because not only was there the famous oil spill at McLean Mill, but when the liabilities, environmental liabilities, came under study by the city, members of the APR, and I'm not casting aspersions or pointing out anybody, but the city received assurances that there were no materials being stored at the Roundhouse that were of any volatile nature, until somebody went down and looked at them, and there were materials being stored at the Roundhouse of volatile nature. There were cars, rail cars with diesel that had to be disposed of by the city. Now, that's nobody's fault as to why that was there, but it calls into question the reliability of people that say, trust us, trust us, trust us, trust us, when we have in the past not had our concerns adequately met. That's why we have insurance. Insurance adjusts for two things. One is the percent chance of something going bad. And that's almost impossible unless we actually get some actuaries in here who have studied railways to tell us how often things go bad. Then they adjust for the amount that it costs when things go bad. And again, we don't know that. We know $1.2 million on the experience we have. We don't know what could happen and what it may catalyze happening after. If there's, we talk about oil spills, so I'll talk about oil spills. It could be anything other than an oil spill. I'd hate to see a boiler blow up. But once there is an oil spill, what does that do? So does that require that there are then continuing events? So it's not just the oil spill, but the cleanup of the oil spill requires other work to be done to the dry creek habitat that requires cleanup of existing contaminants to bring it back to a certain nature. I don't know because I'm not an expert. But to just assume that nothing bad happened in a year, so nothing bad is ever going to happen, that's like saying, well, we can do base jumping off the top of the old silos, and until somebody dies, nobody's going to die. So the need for insurance is an important requirement. Now, I've heard it said that no one has this type of insurance. It's impossible to get, so nobody has it, and other railways operate without it. The flip side of that coin is lots of places might want a railway, but don't have one because they can't get the insurance. There is always an option for the city to self-insure, and we would insure our own actions. That means essentially putting aside a little bit of money out of the budget every year as a reserve for when things go wrong. If we did that, we could put quite easily a financial number on this to say what it costs us to insure the railway. So then the question should be to council, are you willing to set aside $200,000 a year in your budget to just sit there as an insurance so you can have a railway? Are you also willing to increase the amount of your staff wages because you're creating almost a whole, well, not a whole position, but you're creating a significant numbers of new duties for the manager of culture, was suggested, but could be for anyone, to do inspections that I don't think our manager of culture, I could be wrong, is qualified to do. What do they know about inspecting railways? If they did, they probably would have been working for the Transportation Safety Board, but they don't. So I applaud council's creativeness. I echo council's desire to see a valid promotional activity happening in Port Alberni that has true historic value. I don't think that any of the suggestions that we've come up with yet are viable financially, and we certainly haven't discussed what the financial impact of any of these things will be. And simply trusting the members of the APR, although they're all trustworthy people, doesn't create any accountability because there is nothing there from a legal framework that could compensate the city for any damages done. We certainly wouldn't go after an individual of the APR and take away their house because there was $1 million damages. That wouldn't happen. So the legal structure of this arrangement doesn't provide for any accountability. So where we are is where we started, which is we all would like to see a railway. There's certain requirements for a reliable business case to have a railway. One of those requirements is some surety of safety, whether that's through inspections or insurance or something, but no viable outcome or alternative to address those concerns has been met. So in the current situation, after much babbling, I would be voting in favor of this motion to not go ahead until there is an environmental insurance policy obtained. Having said that, should some other options and suggestions come forward that equally meet the concerns that council should have for the potential financial disaster that could occur, not that will, but could, then I'd be willing to entertain those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patola. I do just want to clarify, I think it's important that nobody is suggesting that we simply trust the volunteers, you know, well-intentioned volunteers as they are. I think that even if there was full insurance, it is not reasonable for us to have an agreement with no oversight whatsoever. So I think what we are talking about today is what is council's level of risk that they are prepared to take on. And I think we all have different levels of risk that we're comfortable with. And so that's really obviously the discussion we have to have here today. And my perspective is what can we mitigate and what systems can we put in place? I think you make a great point about the manager of culture. I don't know what her background is, but it may not be inspecting railways. However, we do have a lot of expertise at the city, and we may have not people specifically, with railway background, but we absolutely do have expertise on our team who could identify environmental risks, who could be responsible for a quarterly check-in or oversight, and completely reasonable to recognize that that does not eliminate the risk in any way. So no suggestion whatsoever that the risk is being eliminated if we did move forward in a different way, but rather a discussion about what we're comfortable with in terms of level of risk and how it can be mitigated. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Haggard.
Madam Mayor, I know we've had this discussion in the past, but I would really like to have, what would be the cost for this insurance? And why could we not have had it in the past? Is it because of the cost? I'm just kind of curious to know, and the public would like to know, I'm sure too, what is the cost and what's the issue from the last, in 2024, not to have it?
Mike, go ahead.
Sure, thanks for the question. An environmental insurance policy on the actual lands, we would have to do a background study. Depending on what that background study would find out, would mitigate whether we have to do an environmental cleanup at this stage. Currently, we have no studies down on the railway or on the lands there. It is a fee simple lot that has been used for transportation of rail for many years. So I'm not sure what that background study would ascertain, or what the cost, if there is anything to clean up, what that would cost to clean up. So it's a difficult question to answer. Our conversations with legal and our insurance is we might not be able to get an environmental policy on those lands with our past history on claims from insurance, or if they were to give it, they would have to understand more of the current situation on the lands and understand that the city has complete oversight of the actions. So again, for a complete oversight, that is more than just quarterly inspection. Again, this is all to Councillor Petola's point, we could put away funding in a different way if that's what council does, but this does come down to risk mitigation. There are many other places in town where we don't have background knowledge, but we don't lease it out to a third party without those requirements usually. And administration would not recommend to take that risk unless we had a full understanding of the complications of the site. So one of the legal adds for this is, let's say there was a basic spill. The APR does have insurance for a basic spill. A leakage happens on the ground. They go and do the testing, find out that the testing actually goes further. I'm sure there would be an argument what was caused from historic contamination, if there is historic contamination, because we don't know, or was it caused from that spill? And that would be something for the insurance company and our lawyers to figure out over time. I have never known an insurance company, if there is sort of absence of information, to exploit that. So in short, it would be a longer process to get a full environmental process, and there is considerable risk in moving forward. In saying that, cities do move forward with that risk as long as it's known.
Thank you. Follow up?
So that was, yes, a follow-up. That was long-winded. And I understand that. So I'm just kind of curious to know. So the leakage we're concerned about is from the tanks, not from the train itself. Is that correct? That's the first question.
So through the chair, a leak can come from many ways. It could be from the train. It could be from somebody else going down and spilling oil on the site. Again, it could be from any type of spill on the land. That's what an insurance and policy is going for. The insurance policy that is currently in place from the APR is dealing strictly with when the train is in use. I'm not sure, I didn't look at the policy to see if it contains some storage of fuel, but I believe it would contain some storage of fuel up to X amount of liters. But again, I didn't read, I think I was provided a copy, but I'm not sure of the exact type, but it is an operational insurance, not for insurance for other type of contaminants from any other activities. You know, currently the city does not have an agreement also with the transport trucks that run on Harbor Road. Again, that isn't a roadway. It is not covered by insurance. We know that. We used to have a tri-party agreement for the use of Harbor Creek where people paid for the maintaining of the road and covered that insurance for down there. That could also be a type of spill that could happen on those lands. They are not separated. So again, it's there are activities that happen within the city that we do not have coverage. So I'm not trying to say that this is the only activity, but administration would have the same recommendation moving forward on an agreement for allowing truck traffic on that site. I don't know what the background is there. We just did extensive cleanup on the SOMAS lands to bring it up to a standard so a development could move forward. You know, I'm not sure what those lands contain.
Okay, thank you. You know, I look around the whole community and what we drive and what we were, like a logging community. I mean, those big trucks, the boys in their trucks, and they're out there fixing their trucks and leakage and that. So I know we have contaminated lands all over the place in maybe little pot areas. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to know what service stations do for insurance, because obviously we have big tanks underground and stuff like that. Is there another insurance that they could get that would help make this be enough for the city instead of going through, because you mentioned that we would have to go through a study, and studies take a long time and staff time, and you'd have to have probably, there's be a contractor involved, and that could be who knows how long. And is there something else we could do to help mitigate all this? Say no.
Through the chair, again, it's up to council on the amount of risk you are willing to take. As far as service stations, most service stations now are not going in ground because it's very tough for them to get environmental insurance with underground tanks. You know, I don't know the whole history on that, but you see we have several ex-service stations in town that are responsible for the full remediation of a site before it can be saleable. So, you know, there are constraints put on service stations, gas stations, etc. You'll see a lot of gas stations or filling stations that are above ground now with containment containers or double-walled facilities. So again, I'm not an expert in that way. If you wanted us to explore that, we could. Again, I think the gist of it comes down to environmental coverage over the lands that we're talking about. And again, we don't have enough background history on those lands or samples to understand what is there currently. And I believe that's where the crux of the risk is.
So the other question was, is there another insurance that would help in some capacity if they're other than this one? And also, I look at that the train in years before was running constantly. So there has to be contamination, and not necessarily from this operation. And I'm sure there's a lot of contamination on the tracks.
Yeah, I don't believe there would be any insurance company that would insure something that they don't understand the history of. So I'm not sure about that. Again, we've checked with our insurance companies, which is used to dealing with municipal type insurance on many types of land. And again, we would need more information, direct oversight over the activities. So I don't have that information for you. And yes, historically, that is why we aren't recommending a study on those lands. If I had to guess, I would guess that there is some contamination on those lands. I'm not saying that there isn't. I'm not saying that there is. I don't have that information to tell you. So, but I believe there is no insurance company that I'm aware of that would take that risk on.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mike, you said you needed oversight by staff. How in-depth of oversight do we need by staff?
They didn't define it exactly, and I didn't dig into it more. It was that we understood the activity, and it's sort of, it was a comparison almost like our ammonia plants or our chlorine plants. We have to have oversight. So I believe that is the appropriate knowledge, understanding of the actions that are taking place and the risk along there. Again, we would have contingency plans in place as a municipality. And probably the operation of it would be part of our operations. Again, I could get clarification on that, but currently we weren't looking at operating the railway. We were hoping the APR could continue operating the railway, and that we would oversee it in a manner if this moves forward.
I'm wondering if APR would be willing to develop a mitigation plan that would be satisfy the city, that they're doing regular inspections on their equipment and ensuring that there's no environmental spills that may happen. Well, it could happen, but they're being prevented as possible. And my second suggestion is if Willa could talk to our manager of culture and seeing if she would be willing to learn what she has to do in order to oversee the APR operations, the APR to satisfy insurance.
So, Madam Mayor, I can say with great confidence that our manager culture would be happy to assist in any way and any direction she's given. Again, it's ensuring that it's going back to what of the risk that council has the appetite to undertake, and then that whatever that associated action items might be, keeping in mind that would should that pull our manager culture away from other tasks as well, just council being aware of that.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mealy, and then we will, assuming it's okay with council, go to the Industrial Heritage Group or APR Group.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd love to hear, just because I think we just had this discussion, and I think it's important to note, like, we're talking about the reason why we're doing this is because we can't get the environmental insurance policy, or don't have the coverage yet. Mr. Fox and the APR has just stated that there is a level of coverage. And along with the level of stewardship that the APR and I have talked about just recently of the actual railway, I feel that it's still a viable option. But I'd love to hear, just based on what the APR has, and have an understanding of what level of coverage we do have.
Thank you. Is council as a whole supportive of inviting the APR up? Yes. Okay, seeing agreement. Richard?
So I'll have to echo Councillor Patola's comments because I too am no expert on insurance or anything for that matter when it comes to this kind of stuff. I think the CAO sort of outlined our coverage on what we have the best. I think that was the best way that I've heard it described. And I did send councillors a letter a couple days ago, I believe, which actually outlined the direct comments from our insurance broker on that. CAO outlined it much better than that. When it comes to assuring council that we are conducting a safe operation in the sense of environmental, we would be more than happy to build in any additional policies. We do have volunteers on site, and we do have constantly multiple days a week, and we do have a policy and a plan put in place for if there is a spill. That's a requirement for technical safety. That was at the start, that was a requirement for the city. So we do have that policy in place. And just for something for preventative measures, if we were to conduct, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly site inspections, whether it's us and submitting a report to the manager of culture or us with the manager of culture, however council would like that to look, we are more than happy to work with you all on that. if it means to continue the operation in a way that everyone is comfortable with.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions specifically for APR from council? Councillor Patola.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, through you to Mr. Spence. Since really this question floats around, not if there is risk, although some might debate that, but from my point of view, it's not a question of if there is risk. It's just a question of who is going to accept the risk. And certainly we don't want it falling on the APR because that means somebody sues you, that means they sue you, and that certainly is not a a nice position to be in. As council, as a member of council, I don't want the city to be sued, so we don't want the risk. We hear anecdotally or third hand from insurance companies that they don't want the risk. I wonder if you have had any discussions with the ICF to see if they'll take the risk. Because of course, we're talking about rail that is owned by the city, and that's why we're in this. If this APR was to run on rail that was not owned by the city, but the ICF, then the ICF could take the risk. Or the ACRD could take the risk if there was a station built on ACRD land. I don't want you to be hearing a no from us, or from me particularly, but what I am interested in finding out is there is risk. Who's going to take it? And make sure that all the possible avenues have been exhausted. Because if nobody wants to take it, then the hot potato falls down and sits on the ground and gets cold. Thank you.
So we haven't had those discussions with the ICF. We are going into discussions currently this week actually on operating a further route than just the City of Port Alberni property, extending onto their property, so that we're going into initial discussions with them on that. They have expressed that they are very interested in supporting that, but we don't know what that looks like at this point. And I can't say anything else for certain until I speak to them. I get a little confused when we're talking about city property compared to the ICF property. Why would the city take risk on ICF property and vice versa? And then we are the middle ground. We are the operation. We have the coverage, as Mike said, for the operation. But then when it comes to the landowners, I guess you can say, under the agreements, I'm really not sure at that point. I would have to look back and further and discuss with staff as well.
Am I hearing that the question is there a possibility, like presumably ICF has a policy that includes environmental, potentially, likely, who knows, for operations on their land? Am I hearing that potentially the question is, can we piggyback onto their policy for this operation as well? Like asking if we could explore that?
I'm not sure who's included in the we. It would be in my mind, it would be the APR doing operations on ICF rails, not on Port Alberni City rails. So the city therefore would not be involved with regards to environmental on a particular piece of land. The city may still be involved because of whatever the ownership of apparatus is, but it would be a different implication that the city may be insurable for, because it would be more similar to the insurance operations, and the ICF would be responsible, or not responsible, but would make their own decision whether or not they have an insurance policy for environmental contamination of lands, and whether or not that's a risk they wish to take.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dame and then Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think that for me, it comes down to if I could simplify it, there are two asks of the city. It's that can the operations take place on city land, and is the city willing to pay for it if a disaster happens? Those are the two questions, and that's essentially we're saying yes, it can happen on our land, and yes, we will pay for it if something goes wrong. And and I think maybe that framing of it might help in order to see why that is a risk I'm uncomfortable with, if, to those listening. And I think that one factor that hasn't really been brought up entirely, although you did mention, Madam Mayor, that we do have staff that are qualified to make those inspections. But it does give me, some confidence to hear, the APR's, the confidence and eagerness that they have to, be thorough in their inspections and in their operations. However, I still don't know the qualifications of the people involved, and something that hasn't been mentioned yet is the long term. There might be a couple of people there currently who are qualified to make these level of inspections and maintenance. However, what about in 5 years? What about, are these? Is this going to be a long term thing, or are we going to have to look at? You could speculate in all sorts of different directions, but it just becomes murky, I guess, in trying to make that decision of whether or not we have enough confidence that we're willing to pay if something goes wrong. And that's the question that continues to sort of rattle around in my head. And for me, it's much easier to just say, no, I'm not. I agree with staff. I agree with Councillor Patola that I don't want to have to face my community members, the public, my neighbors, if something goes wrong, and say, yeah, sorry, I was a part of making the decision that is now costing you a lot of money. And that's heartbreaking, because I also don't want to be a part of bringing a close to the operations of the APR. So I guess what I am hoping for is a miracle where we figure out some form of insurance where we don't have to say, yes, we will pay for it if something goes wrong, where we have a plan for what to do then. And we don't have that plan right now, and that's what's leaving me in a situation of having to agree with staff recommendation here that we not support it until we have that plan.
Thank you. Council, as we go around on this, and it is a hard issue, this is not the first time we've talked about it, it's not the second time, it's not the third time. So this is something that I think we likely will continue to be somewhat torn on. I just want to, I think, state my opinion is that the city does take, as our CIO has stated, the city does take calculated risks on many things. And this is not the only area where, we have a potential risk or liability and we continue with the operation. Are we going to consider closing down to truck traffic Harbor Road? Probably not, but we do know that a risk exists there. So I think I'll just put it out there. The motion is moved and seconded. I will go to Councillor Solda in a moment. The motion is moved and seconded. I would be comfortable considering moving forward with the rail operation if staff develops a risk mitigation plan that includes inspections, sign-offs, policies and processes, basically, so that there is a plan in place where our staff are overseeing the agreement. We all have a good understanding of what's being watched for, how frequently inspections are being done, et cetera. So I would be comfortable moving forward with that in lieu of having the specific insurance for environmental. And I think important to note again that the other insurances are in place. We are only talking about potential for environmental. So if this motion fails, I will put forward an additional motion around staff putting together a risk mitigation plan for council's approval or review and approval for us to consider before we sign an agreement. It doesn't mean that we are moving forward. It means we'd be asking staff what would a plan to mitigate the risk look like for our consideration, so that we can have this discussion again. Because I think that it's we can talk about who might inspect and what qualifications do they have and how frequent would it be, but without having a potential plan in front of us from staff, we don't really have anything to actually properly debate. So if council is not moving forward or not comfortable moving forward, if we don't have that environmental insurance policy 100%, then we pass this motion today and we don't move forward, and that's council's choice. However, if council wants to leave it open and consider a risk mitigation plan and get further information on what that would look like, then we would defeat the motion that's been moved and seconded, and I will put forward another one. However council wants to move forward, recognizing this is a tough issue, but from my perspective, there are still additional ways that we can mitigate the risk and bring benefit to the community through this operation. Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Interesting. I'm kind of curious to know how the co-op, the new co-op, Johnson Roads Co-op, I believe their tanks are going up underground. Maybe I'm totally wrong, and how they are doing their risk survey or risk insurance and stuff like that. That would be interesting to know. But anyways, what I really want to talk about is regarding the Western Vancouver Island Heritage Society sent the email that was sent to us, and they talk about the guild insurance, and they responded to the society's inquiry. I'm just kind of curious to know what they mean by when it says your sudden and accidental pollution insurance covers you as follows, and does not all that coverage, because it says it provides such spills, discharge, emission, dispersal, seepage, leakage, migration, release of escape pollutants, et cetera, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Would that not be enough for us? I'm just kind of curious to know, is that not enough? Because that's in there. And if it's in writing in their insurance, then it has to be something.
Councillor Mealy.
Yeah, that was just kind of, I was just going to go through that and just because the Madam Mayor is talking about a higher level of inspection. And so part of that is, as Councillor Solda just read, so results in the injurious presence of pollutants in or upon land, the atmosphere, drainage, or sewage system, water course, and body water, and is detected within 120 hours after the commencement of the spill, discharge, emission, dispersal, seepage, leakage, migration, release, and escape. So it has to be done within 120 hours. So that means that it's up to APR or those people to do regular inspections all the time to ensure. And as soon as they see something, it has to be done with 120 hours, so there's coverage there. So there is coverage there. It just you have to be very diligent in how we do it. And in discussions that I've had with the APR, they're willing to be even more diligent in being a steward of the rail. So again, that's what I read when I see that, Councillor Solda, and that was an email to everybody. But it would have to be within 120 hours. So again, going back to what Madam Mayor said, is we need to have a mitigation plan, or at least ensure that we have a very high level of inspection to ensure that everything's caught within a 120-hour span, so that insurance can be taken care of or can cover it.
So the last line says, my other railways don't carry a full environmental policy that would cover gradual pollution events. That's the real difference, as if you had something that was a slow leak over time and it wasn't detected right away for some reason, then you wouldn't have coverage under your current policy. So if we come up with a proper plan and everything, that would help. I don't know if it'll help satisfy us, but I will be voting no on this motion, waiting for the mayor's new motion, which I would support.
Councillor Verbrugge.
My 2 bits worth. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're worried about diesel spills. So if we use proper double-walled diesel tanks in plain sight, anybody walking past can see the diesel underneath. They've got 24 hours to report it. And if the trains are steam-powered, coal-fired, steam-powered, there is no pollution that I can think of other than smoke. So I would vote yes on this motion, and because I can't see a problem if it's done properly.
Thank you, Councillor Verbrugge. Yeah, and I think for awareness as well, like I think it is important to remember that our staff did inspections when we started having these conversations, that we did remove some, I think, single wall tanks from the site, that we looked at what the risks were for potential spills, and we did mitigate some of those. So I'm talking about just what additionally can we do to ensure that, you know, things that aren't supposed to be on the site don't get moved to the site. And so Yeah, I think there are additional steps we can take in order to gain comfort, not to eliminate the risk. I recognize that we will not eliminate the risk, but to mitigate the risk. Okay, we've had lots of discussion on this. So for everyone's awareness, the motion that currently stands is that council direct administration to not extend the railway operation and maintenance agreement with Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society until an environmental insurance policy can be obtained. So just for clarity, if you do want to consider, it's a little confusing today, but if you do want to consider enabling the railway, then you vote against this motion. If you want to not move forward with the railway, then you vote for it. Is that clear?
I know. It wasn't that, then repeat it again.
I know, so it's because the motion is written to not proceed. So if you do want to consider proceeding with the railway, then you have to vote against the motion today. So it's just backwards from what it normally is, which is why I'm noting it. Councillor Patola.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Mayor. It's not whether you want to proceed with the railway. It's whether you want insurance on the railway.
Yes, thank you for that. That is an important point of clarification because I think we all want to proceed with the railway. However, it's what level of risk we're willing to take. So general stands though, if we are not comfortable moving forward without the insurance, you vote for. If you are comfortable exploring other options to move forward, we vote against. Councillor Solda.
So Madam Mayor, but they do have insurance, but I'm not sure how depth that is. It's just not what is stated here. I mean, we just looked at what they have on paper. So how much do we need? And, you know, because I support the rail going forward, but I would like to report though.
Mike.
Thanks. I'll try and clarify it a little bit for you, Cindy. So their insurer is completely correct. We have the same understanding. They're covering anything but a slow leak that goes undetected or any past leakage. And in that 120 hours, trying to delineate the amount of background spillage, what was new and what was old would be tough. And that's where the arguments or the legal challenges could be promoted. The stuff that's pooled on logs, rail, sitting there is not going to be, that won't be argued because it'll be fresh. It'll be the stuff that in 120 hours, how far did it go? If it landed in the stream, made its way out to the inlet, how much was from the actual spill, how much was always going out into the inlet, how much is being washed? You know, we understand there's tides and there is contaminants that are washed into the inlet every day. So I believe that's the difference. So during operations, they are covered operationally. They aren't covering things that are outside of their operations. I guess that's there's two different types of policies on that.
So I know you want to move on, but just, okay, so we're 120 hours, but they could do a different rotation of checking. It doesn't have to be, they could do it like every 2 days or something like that. It could be checked. I mean, a trucker goes around his truck and walks around the truck every time he gets into a truck, right? So I'm not suggesting that we go around and do this every hour on the hour. I'm just saying within that 120 hours span between the rail as well as the staff. I don't know. But that's where a report would come in and give us a picture of what that window would look like.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. Thank you everyone for the excellent discussion. I'm going to move that council request staff prepare a report including what a risk mitigation plan for the Alberni Pacific Railway would look like and bring it back to council for consideration. Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Councillor Haggard.
Can we also request a mitigation plan that APR made for Transport Canada? Or Technical Safety BC, sorry.
Absolutely, and I think that could just play into the plan for sure, so that's great. Okay, Councillor Patola.
I'm not sure how to word this. So let me tell you what I would like, Madam Mayor, and see if your wisdom can get me there. My concern is that a risk mitigation plan is something that is not the same as insurance. Every industry has risk mitigation plans, and every industry carries insurance. The two are not the same. Risk mitigation plans have an effect of lowering the cost of or increasing the accessibility to insurance. So I have already professed to be a good driver today in council, and people may argue that. But it is my driving record and the mitigation that I do in not having accidents that provides me with the insurance rates I get. It doesn't affect whether I get insurance. If I had lots of accidents, I could still get insurance. It would cost me more. So there is no point where I could have no accidents for 50 years and not have to have insurance, because it could still happen. So I think there's real value in your motion towards getting a mitigation plan and fully understanding what we're dealing with, because I hear we all have different understandings. But I think what I'm really interested in is how a mitigation plan affects the availability of insurance. Is there some level of input that the city or the APR could have that would then facilitate the insurance that we are interested in discussing, whether or not we are agreed whether this is necessary?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. So I think two things come to mind. Firstly, you mentioned self-insuring, and I think that is something that we should not take off the table. If we are going to move forward with this, then maybe it is creating a reserve, putting a number on it and contributing to it every year in order to give comfort. So that may be we have a risk mitigation plan in place still. I see those as somewhat separate. I mean, overall, my kind of feeling is if we're going to enter into another agreement, we should have a risk mitigation plan in place. We should all understand what it is, who's overseeing it, what the steps are for our comfort. Then the question of whether that helps us get insurance, maybe not, but it's possible, and maybe there is a path to insurance through having a really clear and defined plan in place. But if not, then we absolutely, I think, can still talk about self-insurance. And not to say that council will not move forward unless we self-insure, but I've heard some willingness to discuss that, and so I think this motion gives us a path to keep working with the APR to see what plan we could put in place for operational comfort and to reduce the risk as much as possible, and then to continue the conversation about is council comfortable moving forward without insurance? Is there a path this could help us access insurance, or do we want to self-insure and begin contributing to a reserve for this? Councillor Solda, and then Councillor Mealy.
I do like Councillor Spatola's idea about going to the ICF and checking with them about insurance, or piggybacking on them, or would they be interested? And I think that's really important to add that into the motion too, and I'll make a move to make that amendment that we add that we check with the rail checks with the ICF. I don't know if that.
Yeah, we could add that,
Yeah.
for sure.
Why not?
I'll accept that. So just an amendment to say and, I think it's different, but and we see if there's any options for insurance via ICF.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Probably
Okay.
not, but-
Well, you never know. Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. So what I take out of your motion is, so we have insurance in place. The risk mitigation plan will tell us if they're doing the checks in the required amount of time. So if the risk mitigation plan says, oh, we check the rail, we check these areas once every week, well, that's not going to work because something could happen. So we need to make sure that it's happening with respect once every 2 days or whatever it is, okay? So that's what I got out of that motion, and how the insurance is there. It's just the requirements of the insurance can we ensure that the APR is doing what they need to do to catch something at the right time? The other part of that, the ICF, I know maybe Councilor Patola can correct me, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but I thought you were leading towards selling or giving the rail to the ICF and letting them just deal with it. Maybe that's what I took out of it. No, I apologize, Councilor Patola. So I do apologize for that. I thought that would be it, just merely because we're talking about, ICF looking to insure on our land or us looking to insure on their land. It doesn't make sense. So if it was under one umbrella, that's what I thought, but I do apologize if I'm wrong.
Yeah, thank you. And I think on the insurance, so possibly what we find is if we write up a risk mitigation plan, then we make that insurance void in a way, or sorry, valid in a way that we're comfortable with. Probably requires, who's documenting what, et cetera. However, I think it's really important to note that while APR has gone out and gotten insurance, we have not, I don't think, reviewed that insurance with our insurer to say, like, would it be adequate? So I think there's some level of insurance in place. It's helpful. Let's get a risk mitigation plan together. Let's review that policy. Let's see if there's anything from ICF. Let's circle back and have this conversation again, maybe shorter next time. I don't know. We'll see, but probably not shorter. We're gonna keep doing this. Okay, is everyone clear on the motion? Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Unopposed, carried. Thanks, everyone. Okay, moving on from that, 2024 councillor by-election results. And I will move that council receive the 2024, or the report 2024 councillor by-election results dated December 24th, 2024. Seconded by councillor Patola. Corporate Officer Sarah, did you want to speak to this at all, or it's just the official results?
I'm happy to speak to it. It would just be a general overview. I think we're all pretty aware of what transpired, so happy to just have it received as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And that is moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 7, McLean Mill level of service. We have a report dated December 23rd, 2024 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture regarding level of service at McLean Mill. Willa.
Madam Mayor, in January 2024, the city renewed the operation and management agreement of the McLean Mill with the Chamber of Commerce for a 3-year period. Since the agreement has been signed, the Chamber has sought opportunities to diversify use of the site. It's dreamy to see increased use of our city-owned properties. And today, staff are seeking clarity from Council to ensure that your expectations on the level of service at the site are being met. And therefore, there are 3 recommendations outlined on page 101 of your agenda.
Thank you very much. I do note that the Chamber did send a letter, but I don't think we added it as a late item. And since we do have the President of the Chamber here, or sorry, CEO of the Chamber, if Council's okay with it, we'll just invite her up in case she wants to provide any comments before we have this discussion. And I do note that a presentation was made at a previous committee of the whole meeting, I believe. So we have had some input around the business plan and a bit of opportunity for question, but I will just invite Jolene up in case she wants to make any comments before our discussion. And then I'm sure she'll be available for questions if we have any.
At your service. Thank you. Yes, so I am pleased to hear that the letter that we submitted on Friday was received. I hope everyone had the chance to read it, and just want to take this opportunity to congratulate Councillor Tom Verbrugge to Council and welcome you to your first meeting. So we had sent a letter. Your question before you is in respect to film policy, and we, as the Chamber of Commerce, had the opportunity to meet with the Mayor and CAO in December, just a few days before the report from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage did the report. So I think this may be a gap in communication. For the film policy, we heard kind of loud and clear from Council that they don't want to be surprised if a film project is going to come to the site. We have some areas in our contract where we need to strengthen lines of communication on seeking formal approval for use in the historic zone. For members of the public, there are two zones at McLean Mill. There's the historic zone and non-historic zone. That may not be clear to a average visitor to the site, but for the purpose of this conversation and in the agreement, those are two zones that are very important to the discussion before you on whether or not we charge admission, whether or not we close the historic zone, and so forth. So in our meeting with the CAO and with the mayor, we disclosed that we would not close the site because we do have that shared value in making sure that there is public access to the site. Always. So the 1 mile film production, I think we all know that was in town. That was a special circumstance. I think the last time we had a film was Insomnia. So it's one of those one-off things that made us all think hard, act quick, and just kind of get it done. And we had a huge excitement and a huge boost in revenues to the community. So in our response to the letter and the recommendations put forward to you is some recommendations on written approvals and different fees associated on what is your share and what is our share when we use the historic zone. We welcome a discussion on what is fair and how we achieve that. We did express to the mayor and CAO that we, again, would not be closing the site ever. And then in respect to charging admissions, we just want to clarify for everybody that there has always been admissions to the entire site since 2001. The only time that there wasn't admissions charged to the site was during the pandemic years in the first version of where our relationship begins from 2020 to 2023 in the first version of the contract. In our contract that the Director of Parks has stated we renewed in January of 2024, there is this tiny little line that does say that we can generate revenues through events, admissions, and so forth. So it's very exciting. McLean Mill, I know it can be challenging. It was part and party to the discussion that you just had with the APR, where there was an oil spill on the site in 2020. So anyways, we're proud stewards of taking care of McLean Mill because it truly does tell the story of our history, but it also is helping carve that path to showing how we are diversifying and moving to tourism. So from forestry to tourism is in alignment with the corporate strategic plan of the city of Port Alberni, but that was more or less just some points that we wanted to make sure that what's before you, that there's an incorrect line that says we don't consider the historic, that we haven't been charging admission, and it's always been charged, but we had a different context at that time. It was packaged with the steam train, and those are separate matters right now. The other part is it's a national historic site. I think Councillor Patola loves analogies. Although you may view it as a park or a green space, it is still a national historic site. Much like Johnston Road is a street or a road, pardon me, and a highway is designated as a highway, and we don't really kind of take away that designation. So it is a unique gem for the Alberni Valley. We're proud stewards, and as the Chamber of Commerce, we're really excited to demonstrate what tourism looks like and preserving history and so forth. So some of that is in the letter, some of that's a little extra. Thank you.
Thank you, Jolene. Okay, comments from council. And then we will go through these motions individually, I think is probably simplest. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I actually have no problem with the chamber charging admission for people to tour the site. I don't see that as being a big problem. If somebody wants to go and have a look and there's a small fee attached to it, I'm sure that that's not going to be a major deterrent. I do support the other two parts of the motion, though, requiring written approval by the city prior to closing the site for more than a day. I support that, and I also support if the site is closed for a longer period of time, which the CEO has just stated is highly unlikely to happen in the future. But just in such a case that that opportunity does arise, I agree that the city's gross revenues should probably, or sorry, that the city should receive 50% of gross revenues rather than 15% if it's a long-term closure. So I would be supporting those two, but not the third one, because I don't have a problem with there being admission charge.
Thank you. And I'll just kind of echo some of those comments. Firstly, I think that the fees were one where we've had quite a bit of misunderstanding on like what has historically happened versus what hasn't. But actually, Councillor Dame, you made a comment when we were chatting about this a month or so ago, and you said we're asking the chamber to continue to offer the service, but we are trying to reduce their subsidy. So, you know, we have to allow them to make up that revenue somewhere. And if we take away their ability to charge admission, then that just puts further strain on. So as we continue to reduce the subsidy, I think that allowing them to generate revenue out there in order to keep the doors open does make sense for sure. And I just want to clarify as well that I know it was stated that the chamber doesn't intend to close the site. And I said this when we met with them as well. I think that if there's a great opportunity for the community, like another large movie or something like that, the chamber should be free to have the ability to close the site if it's going to benefit the community. We just want to make sure that there's compensation for that, like that there's benefit to the city for it if it's on the historic site, and that there's communication around it. So I appreciate the sentiment that they don't intend to close the site. I actually want there to be flexibility to close the site if needed. We just want to be able to communicate on it as needed. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And item B, where it says to include increase from 15% to 50% of gross revenues, I think that should be net revenues, because if the chamber is overseeing some kind of a movie event, there is a cost because they probably do have staff there, so it should be net revenues, 50% of net revenues, just so they can cover their cost. And I'll also support charging as well, because the previous director actually suggested that he should be charging for people to go and visit the mill.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Patola.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the CAO, or the Director of Parks. I'm just wondering, now that we have already renewed the contract, how do we amend the contract, or is this all by previous agreement with the Chamber of Commerce?
Really, with any agreement, we can amend it if we come to agreement with both parties. So again, we would sit down with the chamber and we would work on amending it, making sure understanding is clear. Again, the revenue for the historic site currently in the agreement, it's a gray area. It's not spelled out. So there's room for interpretation, and whenever there's room for interpretation, people interpret it differently, and that's what ran into a little bit of an issue back when the filming company first came, and it was highlighted that the site would be closed. Also, on the revenue side, there is a part in the policy that specifies how much the city would be compensated for activities on the historic site. There just may be more to flush out there, and that's why it would be 15% to 50%. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I probably have a follow-up question then, which is, if the other party in a contract doesn't agree to give up what they have for income, then what would be the process to amend this agreement, or would we just leave the agreement as it is?
Yeah, I can clarify that. If parties can't come to an agreement, there is an exit clause in the agreement, and either party could do that, or we could both decide to live with it as it is.
Go ahead, Councillor Patola.
Thank you. And one other matter is, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, when speaking about the entry fee, Madam Mayor, you phrased it in a certain way, and I'm not holding you to that at all, but I do want to clarify it. Madam Mayor, you stated that to remove the entry fee would reduce the chamber's subsidy for operating the mill. I'm not sure that I would characterize it personally as the chamber is being subsidized to operate the mill. As I understand it, the city owns the mill. The city has a contract with the chamber to manage the mill. We pay the chamber to manage the mill, and the chamber takes all the profits from managing the mill. So I don't see where subsidy comes. I just wanted to clarify that because I wouldn't want anybody to think that the cities offer subsidies to private organizations.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Just more generally, my comment was around us reducing the contract for service payment, not subsidy specifically, so that's a fair point. Okay, other comments? Did I see a hand in the back? Come on up, Jolene.
Thank you. I just want to also clarify that there is percentages within the contract. So when we say that the city doesn't receive anything back from this, there is a partnership, but I think we're not allowed to use that language as per the contract. So 5% of each and every single transaction, whether you buy a stick of gum, a guided tour, a wedding event, you receive 5%. Anything that happens in the historic zone, you get an additional 10%. And so the more successful we are, the more successful you are. And that's why we have this here to consider higher percentage of revenue for higher grossing or net. We support the net contracts. I just also want to clarify that for members of the public, their disruption or their access or the fee to pay, we're really only looking at 6 hours a day from May until mid-May till the end of September. So that's half the year. That's only when we're operating. And so that's 7 days a week from the middle of May to the end of September. So before 10 a.m., members can take their dogs for a walk. And then after we close shop at 4, they can also go for that. So if there's this concern, I hear there is support for the admissions, but I just wanted to further provide some clarity to that portion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's just what I was getting to because it is the log train trail. The shadow trail is part, and it's the start of the loop is in the parking lot and ends up in the parking lot. So, and I do agree to allow the Chamber of Commerce to charge, but I do want to make sure that and Ms. Dick did say that after hours and before hours, that people are still free to make that loop and walk through and all that. So access to public still there.
Absolutely. Councillor Mealy, did you want to read the first motion?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor. I move the council directs administration to amend the McLean Mill National Historic Site Non-Historic Zone Operation and Management Agreement with the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce to include requiring written approval of the city prior to the chamber closing the site to the public for longer than 1 day.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no additional discussion on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And Councillor Haggard, do you read the second one?
I move that council directs administration to amend the McLean Mill National Historic Site Non-Historic Zone Operation and Management Agreement with the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce to include an increase from 15% to 50% of net revenues for any site closure longer than 4 consecutive days.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any discussion on this? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And I'll just ask for guidance on the third. If council does not wish to inhibit the ability for the chamber to charge an entry fee or an access fee, are we better to just not read this motion, or do we need to work that into the agreement?
Through the chair, I think it would be good to add it into the agreement that they can, because that will clarify the stance for administration and the chamber moving forward.
Okay, then I will move that council direct administration to amend the McLean Mill National Historic Site Non-Historic Zone Operation and Management Agreement with the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce to enable the Chamber of Commerce to charge an entry fee for the site.
Second.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Solda. Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just to go back to the conversation, just to ensure that it's during operational hours. And I was going to say, what we could do is no, I'll let you go, Madam Mayor. That's what I was going to say. Operational hours. I had another motion with you.
I think if everyone is comfortable, we just leave it. Just generally enable them to charge for access to the site, because that, I think right now what we're struggling with is that it wasn't completely clear if they were able to or not. I don't know if we never necessarily want to put restrictions on that, like during events, during other, right? So if everyone is comfortable with just leaving it to charge for access to the site, enable them to do so, then it can be somewhat vague in the agreement, recognizing that it won't always just be during business hours. Yes.
Madam Mayor, just wanting to clarify that if there's any threshold that council would like to see up until X period of if it's time or fee or whatever the case might be, just wanting to be crystal clear in our agreements, please.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
So yeah, so, sorry, Madam Mayor. So that was going to be my motion, was to read through it, of course, and to go to include public access to the site remaining free of charge outside of their operational hours. And I think that encompasses it.
Sure. What about during events, though? Right? So if we're adding a restriction on it, then I don't know.
Including events, could we not just?
I'm not sure we need to make it any more complicated than enable them, unless we want to restrict it. That it's 10 to 4, they can charge, and outside of that, they cannot. But I think if we want to leave it up to their operational changes, that could shift in the summer. Like, we don't really know what the future holds. So if council wants to restrict it, then we should add. And if we're open to this, then I would leave it. Councillor Solda.
I'm okay not going into the weeds on this, just let them do their thing in that sense.
That's my preference as well, that if we are okay with them charging, we're okay with them charging. I think they should generally determine when that's going to be. They have to have people there in order to charge. So it's not going to be at 10 p.m. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wonder whether that would include the chamber charging the city.
Good question. Like if we use the site for something. I don't know, if we use the site, do we pay already? I mean, not pay, but do we have a number of bookings we can use? Do we use the site often? Go ahead, Jolene.
Madam Mayor, and I think your Director of Parks may also be able to answer this question. This is a legal contract. I know you mostly discuss these things behind closed doors, but for full transparency, in the contract, yes, there's a very specific prescriptive use of how and when you can use the site. So there's a clause there about an Our Town event being used at the site. I also forgot to add that there was a local resident pass too, so if people are walking their dogs between 10 and 4, they pay one time and then they're kind of free to go. So we're hearing what you're saying and we're trying to accommodate that. Yes, I think our operating hours, when we submit our annual operating plan, perhaps the fee schedule and what's associated and what's not included and where and when could be reviewed at that time when you get more information.
Thank you very much. So council, I'm happy with the motion as is. If anyone feels strongly about making an amendment, they can, for sure. But this just clarifies that they are enabled to charge an entry fee as appropriate. Okay. Seeing no hands up on the motion, all in favor? None opposed, carried. Thank you, everyone. All right, moving on. Item number 8, Port Alberni Forest Impact Transition Grant Application. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. and councilors. The Forest Impact Transition Fund was a $500,000 grant opportunity afforded to communities who were impacted by changes in the forest industry. I had intended to have a discussion with council about that grant opportunity and components that would focus on diversification as well as support for the forest industry if council desired. On 2 days' notice back in October, we learned that that funding stream might end. So I submitted an application before the deadline with the impact of the APD closure in mind. The Sand Group sought and was given creditor protection a month after the application was made. A provincial staff member, our primary contact with the individual from Jobs, Economic Development, and Innovation, called to let me know that we might have an opportunity to submit what she called, or what they call, an off-cycle grant application given the changing circumstances. So she arranged for a conversation with the fund managers, and we are being given an opportunity, if we wish, to resubmit that grant application, given the changes in employment in the industry. I am currently looking at economic dependency and export data to determine if the original components that we submitted should be left as is. And I'm also in discussion with the fund manager to determine if the amounts of that I had ascribed to the components in the first place should be revised. There were a number of components that were put forward as a large application for a couple of reasons. One is that we had been told that the fund was fully subscribed, and it was highly unlikely that we would get everything we asked for. So the idea was give them an opportunity and us an opportunity to negotiate components that they might not think were particularly appropriate to the fund. So we are giving some thought to that as we go forward. I've outlined the pros and cons of resubmitting an application or just letting the current application stand. The report to council recommends that we do resubmit. I think it would make for a much stronger and more powerful application. And I learned in a conversation with the fund managers on Thursday that an added bonus of resubmitting could be that a portion of my salary might become eligible for reimbursement. So that could be an additional part of my budget that gets deducted from council's consideration in the budget.
Thank you very much for the report, Pat. Council, are there questions? No, when it comes to grants. Okay, Councillor Mealy, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council approve a new grant application to the Forest Impact Transition Stream of Funding of the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any comments or questions? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you, Pat. And item number 9, council conferences authorization. We have a report dated January 6th from the executive assistant requesting council conference attendance authorization. So the first one here is for Council of Forest Industries taking place in Prince George. I thought we talked about that one already. Did we maybe just put it aside that we weren't sure who was able to attend? Okay, wonderful. That's right. So I am still not able to attend that one. Councillor Verbrugge, are you interested in attending that conference?
I'd have to know a little bit more about it, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, it's April. It's in April in Prince George, and Council of Forest Industries is a great conference to attend. A lot of relevant information for sure. Myself and someone sitting at the back used to go every year. He's unaware. He's just always, yeah, there's the head nod, Ron. He's awake. All right. So, and is anyone else able to attend that conference as well? Okay. We do typically receive one complimentary registration for that conference. So, but I think in the past we have sent 2 people most years. Councillor Dame?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm anxious to go necessarily, but willing if we want to send one for the representative. Yeah, I suppose that's there as an offer if we think that would be helpful. It would be an area that I could certainly use some further education in. So yeah.
Thank you. I do think especially this year, given what's happening locally with the Sand Group, you know, and others having, I mean, we just had that meeting with the Minister of Forest and provincially, and definitely heard from a number of businesses and contractors in the community in the sector who are really struggling. So I think that of all years, this year would be really valuable. I can certainly see if I can move things around in my schedule to attend, but I think at minimum, I think if Councillor Verbrugge is able to attend and Councillor Dame, I can see if I can go in place of one of those, and if not, the 2 of you could go together if you're available. I think that would be great. So why don't I move that council authorize Councillor Verbrugge, Councillor Dame, or 2 of the following 3, Councillor Verbrugge, Councillor Dame, and Mayor Minions to participate in the annual BC Council of Forest Industries 2025 convention taking place April 2nd to 4th in Prince George, with authorization to include reimbursement of expenses incurred as per the travel policy. Seconded by Councillor Haggard. And seeing no discussion on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And then the second here is for the Housing Central Conference, and that is taking place in Vancouver, November 17th to 19th, so a ways out, but I know we wanted to include this one for discussion. Are any members of council interested in attending, able to?
I can.
Okay. Councillor Dame.
I attended that one just recently, and it was quite good. And I do think that there's a lot of value in having someone there. I don't feel that I need to necessarily attend 2 years in a row, though, if somebody else would like to go.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
If nobody's going to go, I will go, Madam Mayor. I'm fine.
I can likely attend this one as well. Is council comfortable sending 2 people to this conference? Okay, so then let's tentatively say that council authorize Mayor Minions and Councillor Solda to participate in the annual Housing Central Conference taking place November 17th to 19th, 2025 in Vancouver, with authorization to include reimbursement of expenses incurred per travel policy. Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Councillor Solda.
On the 17th is a committee of the whole meeting too at that time. We're fine and.
Someone will have to take our places.
Yes, there you go.
All right, seeing no more comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And so staff will check on scheduling for those things, and if we do need to make changes to people, we can do that. And moving on to item 10, draft AVICC and UBCM resolutions on forestry. Pat.
Madam Mayor, councillors, the forest industry has often been described as a Gordian knot, which Wikipedia defines as a seemingly intractable problem solved by brute force. I'm not sure that accurately describes the industry, but it possibly does. And although in previous decades, I've worked as a timber cruiser in a sawmill in the bush, and in this role as economic development manager, I've taken part in numerous forest industry conversations and forums. However, it can be said that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So against that background, I've drafted 2 possible resolutions for council to take to AVICC. One is directed at fiber availability and cost, and the other is a more holistic measure. The draft resolutions follow the form prescribed by AVICC and UBCM, and the first 2 whereases describe what I think is an accurate situation, not only in our community, but in many throughout the province.
Thank you very much, Pat. Thanks for bringing these forward. I think they are very important and well-written as well. Councillor Haggard.
I just want to thank Pat as well for bringing these forward. I think you've really hit the nail on the head on the issues that are in the forestry industry today. So thank you, Pat. Would you like me to read them? Sure. I'd like to move that council direct staffs to submit the following resolutions for consideration at the 2024 Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities AGM and Convention. Whereas hundreds of jobs have been lost in the forest industry in BC in 2024, and hundreds more at risk due to the increasing costs and difficulty of accessing fiber and multiple other reasons. And whereas this forest industry crisis is the potential for declines in population, as well as declines in industrial property tax revenues in dozens of communities throughout British Columbia, now therefore be it resolved that AVICC and UBCM call on the provincial government to accelerate efforts to make fiber available to mills at risk and work with industry as well as other stakeholders to find ways to reduce the risk of fiber delivered to the mills.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And if you want to continue reading the next one.
Thank you. I'd like to move that council direct staff to submit the following resolution for consideration at the 2024 Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities AGM and Convention. Whereas hundreds of jobs have been lost in the forestry industry in 2024, and hundreds more at risk due to the increasing cost of accessing fiber and multiple other reasons, and whereas the forest industry crisis has the potential for population declines, as well as declines in industrial property tax revenues, many communities throughout British Columbia, now therefore be it resolved that AVICC and UBCM call on the provincial government to partner financially in localized efforts to ascertain the fiber type and volume available on a sustainable basis to secure investment and appropriate technologies to maximize the value of that fiber and to retrain forest industry workers to utilize that approach.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. All right, thanks, Pat. And moving on, Councillor Mealy. Sorry, Councillor Patola.
Motion to continue this meeting past 3 hours, open to an amendment, friendly amendment to adjourn for a 5-minute recess.
Motion is seconded to continue, and we can still adjourn for a 5-minute recess if needed. On the motion to extend, all in favor? Carried, not opposed. And would anyone like a 5-minute recess? We don't even need a motion, we can just pause.
Nobody wants that 5 minutes.
All right, we're gonna keep going. Sorry, Councillor Patola. Jim, come forward. Don't you love when like we go for like hours and hours and hours and then we get to your part? And we're like, we're gonna take a 20-minute break. That's right, after lunch. We'll come back after lunch. We're moving on to wastewater treatment facility inspection report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm here to briefly discuss the inspection that we had completed by the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Strategy of the wastewater treatment plant. This was completed back in August of 2024, last summer, and we didn't receive the written report until early December. I want to stress from the outset of this that the results of the inspection, none of it are detrimental to the receiving environment or to public health and safety. The majority of the issues that we were not compliant with are essentially administrative in nature. With the facility being a new plant and a new operating certificate, there's often things that until you start running the plant and start going through the motions of doing the testing and doing the reporting, do you notice and start to determine that there's some issues with it. As an example, one of the things that we were non-compliant with was on the sampling of the effluent, just the frequency of it. It's expected in the certificate that we test a composite sample 24 hours per day, whereas the normal operation of the plant, we don't discharge continuously, so therefore we cannot meet that obligation of testing at regular intervals. The other things are, pardon me, just going through here. One of the other issues with respect to the flow monitoring, so the actual volume analysis of what was leaving the plant, we've had issues since the commissioning of that from both the contractor and the consultant's perspective. We never actually had that flow monitoring equipment functioning properly, so we're still going through the motions of getting subject matter experts in to help us resolve that so that we can actually measure the flow, excuse me. And then the final thing was with respect to some of the guidelines, the effluent quality guidelines that the inspection had issues with are not applicable to the facility, and that was again just due to the fact that it's a new operating certificate. It's very complex, there's a lot of parameters, and as we move forward, we will be making amendment requests to rectify that. With all that said, we have an action plan submitted. It is our utmost priority to get this back within compliance as quick as possible. We recognize the importance of this, both for transparency, but also for the public's trust in us. And I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have on this.
Thank you. I just want to say how much I appreciate you providing this information, and it's disappointing when sometimes information ends up online very out of context. And I think that unfortunately in this case, a member of our community took it as an opportunity to really intentionally spin this into some kind of big conspiracy, when really what it is a new facility and a work in progress to make the operations kind of match what the requirements, and vice versa as we work with the ministry to get everything in order. Appreciate the diligence that our staff are going through in order to make sure that we are in compliance and that the certificate is amended to work for the facility. But yeah, I was really disappointed to see kind of the information that came out online and really just what looked like an intentional effort to undermine our staff and leadership to make it look like we were not doing our due diligence, which certainly is not the case. So really appreciate you bringing forward the information and being on top of it. Comments from council? Well, that's easy. All right. Well, that's all, Jim. Councillor Mealy.
It's going to make the motion, Madam Mayor. If the council received the report, City of Port Alberni wastewater, WWTP, compliance inspection. Yeah, that's right. Anyways. Treatment facility. Thank you so very much. Right, exactly. Dated January 7th, 2025, which includes report number 230565, warning letter from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy dated December 3rd, 2024, and response to warning letter number 230565 from the City of Port Alberni dated December 19th, 2024.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you, Jim. And we will move on to question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council on decisions or recommendations made during the course of the meeting. A maximum of 3 questions per speaker will be permitted. And for anyone participating online, I don't think we have anyone, but please use the raise your hand feature. Would any members of the public like to ask questions today? Jolene.
Thank you, everybody. My question for City Council is, we had 2 major matters in front of you today. So I am the CEO of the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce. I have been on the Alberni Planning Commission, and I have been on the Alberni Valley Heritage Commission once or twice. And I'm on my 2nd time, and I think sometimes we, as the commission, get underutilized. So in trying to make a fair comparison of being used effectively, I think the Alberni Planning Commission receives development requests with thorough staff background reports on how should we allow this building to proceed, how many parking spaces should we say that they need before we make a recommendation to City Council to approve the development permit. And so I think with these 2 major issues in front of you, with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society and your own asset of the Industrial Heritage Collection, the Alberni Pacific Railway, and with the McLean Mill National Historic Site, I'm curious, do you see value in the Heritage Commission, and will you be utilizing them to make recommendations on these types of considerations moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I mean, I would say on some of the kind of more day-to-day operations, it's not necessarily the right place for it. However, we do have considerations coming up on our agenda tomorrow regarding the Industrial Heritage Center, which is a larger issue on how that will move forward. And I think absolutely we would be utilizing them in that case. And I would just say that when we started the rail operations, there was a lot of that discussion did start at when we brought back the rail operations last year, I should say. A lot of that discussion did happen at the commission, as you'll be aware. So I think we are utilizing them in getting the minutes, but I think we could be more intentional in sending to them items that we would like input on. So appreciate that comment, and I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. I think you can expect us to be a little more proactive, and we appreciate Councillor Mealy's attendance there, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Other questions from members of the public? Wow. All right, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.